As soon as we see the banner, we'll go.
Okay, just start. You're ready.
Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order this budget session for the Sweetwater County Board of County Commissioners this June 1st of 2021. We have a quorum present, and at this point in time, as much as it may be a work session, it's still considered a meeting. The commissioners could take action through voting if it were necessary, but I also, at this point in time, will conduct the meeting very similar, but entertain a motion that we suspend Robert's Rules of Order.
So moved.
Got a motion by Commissioner Smith to suspend Robert's Rules of Order. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Shanefield. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign.
Doc Winling.
Motion carries. Thank you. I'm sorry. With that, I still will ask that all speaking still goes through the chair and that we identify. So with that, first up, of course, first thing on the agenda is a budget message from the commissioners. And we will start out where each commissioner will basically give a budget message and where they feel we're at in the budget. So we'll start out with Commissioner Lloyd. Commissioner Lloyd, I yield the floor to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a feeling sometimes I feel like I always have to start off during the tough issues, and I've had to make the final vote on multiple of the ugly issues. So next year I'm going to try to move the middle of the seats to avoid those things. But with that being said, budget message, I think it's simple for me. This is one of the most difficult situations I've ever been in my life, whether as a commissioner, personal life, or business life. Tasked with the deficit that we actually face, and not only a deficit that's current, one that doesn't have a lot of light at the end of the tunnel necessarily to see a large economic boom or, save the day like we have in the past in Sweetwater County. Do I see some positive things happening in the economy? Yes. Was it the big booms that we have typically seen in the past? The answer is no. And I think as we go through, I guess my budget message is consider where we're at. We started this process a little over $12 million in arrears in the hole to make it to get to that point. We have some things have happened that will make it a little bit closer, but it is a difficult situation. And I myself have reached out to multiple agencies and entities about their budgets and have appreciated all the time they've given me. I've had time to visit with Rob and Bonnie both to get some concepts of where we need to move. And so as we meet with you guys and receive funding from the county, a couple of things. Number one, an understanding. And that this is a difficult from our end of the piece, and we have to make some difficult decisions. Number two, I think a realization that tough cuts will be made today and over the next couple of weeks. And none of these are easy. I don't believe there's an entity that we provide money to that doesn't do something well and doesn't do something that benefits the citizens of the community and Sweetwater County. And so as we go through, my focus will be on ensuring that we can meet state statute on the 12 mil and make sure core government can operate in the way it should is the number one priority. Outside of that, I do want to really make sure we're providing to our component agencies, and then if the outside agencies do what we can, but it could be more minimal than in the past from my perspective. But we will do so as fair as we can and as much as information as we can. So I guess the last thing I just want to note to the entities, I do thank you for being here and being understanding. And we know it's tough in your seats, not knowing what your funding will be next year, how it could be affected. But no, we feel for you. And as I've said in a couple budget reduction meetings, and it is difficult. And it's difficult to know how it affects people, employees, people that receive the service. And that's not something we take lightly. But in this current time and temperature of where we're at, we do have to make some very hard decisions. So that's kind of my message.
Thank you, Commissioner Lloyd. Up next, Commissioner Tillman.
Yes, I'm so excited to be here. As Commissioner Wendley reminds me, I'm the new one on the budget process, but I have to remind him I've been 21 years out in that seat out there. So I have a huge amount of empathy for all of you who are in here begging for your budgets. And I guess my message is I don't feel we have a great future as far as more income coming into the county. I mean, if we can just hold flatline, it'll be a miracle for a year or two. So we are going to have to make tough decisions, but I come from the perspective of, I hope this commission as a group that we can look at entities and maybe do some prioritizing, because to take a flat 20%, 30 or whatever you take across the board, you're cutting somebody's legs off, and you'd be better off to totally cut both legs off and fund somebody else so they could continue to operate. So I think making hard choices and doing a little bit of juggling and prioritizing so that we can keep some of our valuable programs, and maybe some that aren't quite as efficient, maybe we're not going to be able to fund them. So that's my perspective. We have to make hard choices, but we have to look at it priority-wise and not just a flat equal cut across the board. So that's my message.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Shanefield?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I echo a lot of what Commissioner Lloyd said. This is going to be difficult. We are going to have to look at all ways that we can cut. I think that a lot of the capital projects that are really needed are going to have to be put on hold until we can turn our revenue around. I think that we're working very hard to do that throughout the county. And I think at the state level, there will continue to be changes as well. I'm also very soft-hearted to the nonprofit organizations that receive funding and our component units, and all of those who are asking for funding and making budget requests, because I've also been on the other side of this. And I think that we need to cut as much as we can without eliminating and destroying the services to our community, because those services are really important, and we will create more of a need throughout our entire community if we cut everything immediately and don't have any of those services. So I think I want to say thank you to all of the groups that I've worked with. The open conversations have been great. Being able to have an understanding has been, great. In two-way open conversations, it's not going to be easy, but we're going to be as fair as possible and really try to work with everybody to keep everybody afloat while cutting as much as we can to keep our heads up above water. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Shanefield. Commissioner Smith?
I guess I will also echo the thoughts that have been shared before, in saying that, it's a difficult process, and one that I've dealt with in other areas and aspects of my life and business. And it is not an easy one, and not one that's taken lightly. And so we truly will, as a board, do our best to make the best decisions that we can, and would ask that people put themselves in our seats sitting here. And again, there are so many that are doing so much good, and we appreciate the work that's done. And cuts, changes, none of that's a reflection on the quality of service that is being provided throughout this county. I'm very proud to live here in Sweetwater County, and very proud of the people and the work that is being done here. And it'll be a tough day, but we'll get through it, and we'll be, I don't know if we'll be better by the end of it, but we'll be through it. How's that?
Sounds good. Thank you. I'd also like to thank everybody for being here. And I think a lot of things have been said already. There's no reason to repeat them, because I think everybody sitting at this table has a true desire to do the best they can for everyone that's involved. But realistically, our number one priority, I truly believe, is funding based on mandated statutes, as dictated by statutes. And we need to follow those first and foremost, with the idea that if we have funding left over, then it should go to our outside agencies and to those component units as well that are not mandated. But there are some statute mandated fundings that are included for those components. So we'll keep all those things. But the one thing to keep in mind is this isn't the end of it. If everybody thinks they're going to walk away on July 1st or when we do our budget hearing, it's over. It's not. There's an anticipation that the county will be $5 million, $8 million short again next year. This is not a one-time. situation. We committed as commissioners 1 or 2 meetings ago with the lead from our treasurer as well as our accountant and to move into this slowly. And we figured we needed a 20% this year from everybody, plus a committed from the reserves, which we have, and we've done that. Plus next year, 20%, give or take a little, plus commitment of the reserves. We know that's what it's going to take to balance the budget. We know that our revenue basically is coming in nearly to balance the budget for county core and for those few components. We know that already. It's everything beyond that, and we don't have that much to spread out. So it doesn't end here. When I look at just as of 5/28, and I know Bonnie might have something more up to date as a 6/1, but I don't know. But when I look at it, I see our departments, core county. I see our component units, which partially are core county, and then others are joint power boards that were mandated by agreements to fund. We can't mess with. They have all had cuts between 10% all the way up to 20 and nearly 21%. Outside agencies have had an increase of 1.42% in budget requests. We've got some work to do. We've got some work to do. And I hope that this can be surgically looked at, as Commissioner Tolman mentioned, and the others. That'll be our job, but there's no guarantees. There are no guarantees. It's going to be tough today. Yes, programs may have to be rethought on how they're delivered. We can no longer walk up, pick the shotgun up, and reload it the same way we have for the past many years. That's an analogy of doing things the same way. We've got to figure out a different way to use our ammunition and how we load that shotgun. And that's where we're at. So with that in mind, I just want people to remind that as difficult as this day for this commission, they're going to have more days ahead. There are some opportunities coming through CARES, but they're going to be watched and very carefully. They're one-time dollars. Everybody, I've on this many times since the enactment of the CARES, the rescue money, primarily, people have said, oh, we got lots of money, we'll just put it on our budgets. That does not take care of that void between revenues and expenditures in a balanced budget. That's a Band-Aid. That's always going to be their deal with. This commission has chosen we need to deal with it now and next year so that we can move into an era when hopefully things get better, that we will begin to move forward. We cannot continually use a deficit. We have, like I said, we have earmarked dollars out of our reserves for over the next 2 years to help with the budget. We have identified cut levels to where we feel we need budget to continue with capital repairs or things that may happen throughout the budget, whether it's roofs, whether it's furnaces, whether it's to keep law enforcement going, whether it's to keep fire defenses in line and other things that are important and that are dictated by statute that we have to do. So with that, I just want everybody to know that as much as we're going to work hard today, it's not going to make everybody happy, but keep in mind, we want you to know what's happening for next year, because we know that for some of you to survive outside agencies, you are going to probably, without a doubt, need to approach other venues for revenue other than just the county. It would not be fair to sit here today and say approach other venues for revenue for this upcoming budget starting July 1st of 2021. But we are telling you almost a year ahead of time that we will watch the budget carefully and we will look at some things in-house. But because of the anticipated reductions of revenue to the county next year, as well as wherever it comes from, we can't print it. Our outside agencies and other financial agencies that we fund need to start now to begin to start looking for outside funding that could help them replace the funding that we cut or help them to continue to operate. And I think that's a fair message, and I think that's plenty of leeway from the standpoint. That's a reality, and I encourage everybody to start looking at that. So with that, commissioners, let's move on. Let's move on with capital construction. Ms. Berry?
Good afternoon, Chairman
Thank you.
and Commissioners. I've got these, but I'll pass them out after we talk about capital. The reason I put this on here is there's been a lot of confusion about the capital changes. Not necessarily with how the capital changes themselves are working. I think people understand they need to submit the form to the capital committee. I think that part's taken care of. I think it was more implementing that change into the budget process. There were several people that were very confused as to whether or not to put those capital projects in their budget, if they were on that list or not. Some people did, some people didn't. Some things were doubled, some people put some of them and didn't put all of them. And then I was supposed to take all of them out, and then I was supposed to put all of them in. And so I was just wondering how we're going to handle this. And then also the whole, they go into one line versus they're in the different departments. I would just like some direction on how this was supposed to work in the budgeting process. That's why I put this on here.
Roy, Commissioner Lloyd, did you attend many of those facility meetings, those capitals?
I did. And I think this is one of those things where as we implement new processes, which I will say, I think this process is really a key for future planning. There are things you missed, and I think we had conversation at first. I think we talked about, and Gene, you can yell in if you kind of led that meeting if I misspeak, is that we thought we'd just put it under the one capital budget to start and not have it within departments. But some folks have raised some concerns of how that does affect the budget. So that was our initial thought. I think part of it was me not being clear enough and having a new process we're trying to roll through to make effective. But I think that was our initial thought. But then some of the concerns that came through were how we track within their own department spending and those things. But I think, Gina, am I correct that our initial thought was it would just become a capital budget? Okay. That was the original intention.
So one line item.
One line item.
One line item. So that's what we want to do. So we want to take all of the capital items out of all of the budgets.
That was our intention.
Can I jump in on this?
Hang on a minute, Mr. Knight. Let's finish here. What were you going to add, Mr. Lloyd?
No, and I think that just kind of reiterating with Marty shaking her head back and Gene, that was kind of our intention of the thought when we started the process.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I was at that point supposed to set up a line item specifically for capital, and everything from that list was supposed to go in that line item.
I think that was our hope, but I don't think we communicated it very well. And it does sound like there have been concerns of some people having ideas of how it could look a little bit differently, but I'm saying that was the original intent.
Okay, so is that how we are to go in the future?
As we move
Next
forward,
Yes.
I guess
You're asking.
from your perspective, from a budgeting perspective, does it work that way? Does it work audit way? Is there a better way to do it? I mean, I'd like to get your opinion also.
I think it's a terrible idea.
Why is that?
I guess I don't fully understand why we would do that. And I'll explain to you why I think it's a terrible idea. One is you're going to have no history. Everything's going to be lumped into to one line item. So you're going to have no history. So next year, you're not going to know what that capital was for. It's going to lose its identity with the departments. So it's lost. I mean, yeah, you could always go recreate it, but why not just put it in the departments if you're wanting to know what it is anyway? Number two, we did that in the past and it didn't work, and I was asked to change it. Previously, how it worked was we had a payroll budget and an operating/capital budget. And then we had that separate line item for these capital projects. And the commission at that point asked, well, why are some included in the budgets, which it sounds like that's what we're gonna do. The small items are still gonna be included in the different budgets, right? That's what we used to do. And then the bigger items were included in this capital line item. And the commission was confused as to why some were in there, why some were in the departments, where did this go? What is this? What made it up? So what happened was I changed it so that not only did we have just the payroll and operating/capital, I changed it to payroll, one operating, one capital. So you could run the report with capital, you could run it without it. It was segregated. They're segregated out on what you receive. The information you saw last week is separated out by payroll, operating, capital. Capital is going to be any item that has a useful life of longer than a year. So you shouldn't see the same capital number year after year, and it's always going to be identified as something. So that's one reason, or those two reasons I think it's a terrible idea. Number three is for the audit, well, for the financial statements that I have to prepare every year, I have to break those out between general government, public safety, road and bridge. I've got categories I have to break them out into. So if we're just lumping these road projects, these general government projects, the public safety automobiles into one line, that doesn't break it out for me. I'm going to have to go in and do adjustments to move it out.
Okay.
So those are kind of the three reasons I think it's.
Okay, hang on
not
to
a great
those
idea.
three.
Okay.
Okay, hang on to them.
And I just was wondering, I guess I don't believe in change unless I feel like there's a good reason for it. And I guess I don't understand the reason for it.
And you may not get a reason for it. You need to know that.
Okay, and
But we're not there yet.
Okay.
We're not
All
there
right.
yet because I want to bring Tim Knight on. I promised Tim to
Okay.
hold. Tim, Mr. Knight, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Good.
So
Talk now.
Sorry.
I think it's good to get Bonnie's input on it because we were going from the standpoint of the committee and Bonnie wasn't included in that, which she probably should have been. I think the main reason we thought it might be good to have a place where you keep all of that is because a lot of times when we actually implement these projects, there is a little bit of carryover that happens. So we may, when we budget for it, we may budget for it at a certain level. And then when we actually spend the money, we might spend less than what was intended. And then that money stays in a department into a department budget and isn't able to be used for maybe the next capital project. And so that was, I think, the intent. But if there's a better way to do it, I think, in my opinion, I think we're open to it because we don't want to create extra work at the audit and other stuff. I think that was our thought. Am I right?
Go ahead, Gene.
The other intent was we're not prioritizing capital projects throughout the county. Kim has important projects, I got important projects, Sheriff has important projects, Marty's got important projects. If we all do that, you guys look at each individually, at least we don't have any say. You know, who's to say that a roof on the detention center is more important than 10 vehicles for the sheriff? When we sit down and we look at those and we can actually prioritize them, and then you guys can say, hey, we only have $1 million. All right, that's where the line is. We agree, but sometimes if I happen to go first in the budgeting process and you spend all the capital on me, the sheriff is third in the budgeting process, he might not get his stuff.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyway, it gets everybody a buy-in and it gets everybody looking at the same thing and moving the county forward as well.
Okay, thank you. Lauren, Commissioner Shanefield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that, so after we talked last week, I think that it's really important to look at these items and compare them and give them priority together. I do think they need to be charged out to whatever department they're going to, obviously, we would be approving, the budget to fit that capital item and then potentially tracking it separately. I don't know exactly what that looks like from your standpoint, but I really like the input. I like the strategic planning around that. And so I understand like that part of it, but I also understand that it needs to be in the line item where it's going to be spent, so that you can track it and everything else for auditing purposes. So I don't know, like I said, I don't know the best way to make that. I mean, I assume we can probably just run a report and have all capital items and then prioritize them and leave it in the spreadsheet the way that you have it. But I think that there's been a lot of times that people build in, a capital whatever into their budget. And if it's within, maybe they cut a position or something. And so we don't even really understand what that capital is. And, we're approving the budget because the numbers look similar to the year before, whatever that might be. But I think it's really important to be able to prioritize, especially when we're cutting so much right now.
Okay.
So that's my stance on the whole thing. I think that we want the input of all of our department heads and
Okay.
our elected officials on the priority. And then we also want to be able to collectively, decide what is important,
Okay.
so that we're not losing those dollars to a project that maybe is not top on the priority list.
Okay. Anything else, commissioners? Marty, from purchasing?
I think to elaborate a little bit about what Tim was saying, and I know where Bonnie's coming from because I deal with the breaking out of all of that when it comes to the audit time. But what we were looking at is right now, if you gave me $500,000 in my budget for capital and for whatever, and I go out and I get that project done and it comes in at $350,000, that other $250,000 sits in my budget. I can spend that. I have the capabilities of spending that. And what us as a committee we're looking at is if we had that extra money, then it's not allowed to be spent on other projects that the commission would have control of that as opposed to the department.
You would follow you would allow money to go to the next priority.
Exactly. And so that's kind of
Okay,
where
let's-
we were going from. I also understand where Bonnie's coming from as well.
But you know what? That's good, because this is all good. This is a good problem to have. Because first of all, it tells me that we need to have our capital list prepared early. We need to sit on it for a little bit till we get rocking and rolling in our budget procedure. Then the commissioners need to work through the budget procedure, look at capital, select those projects off that list, and then they're submitted into the budget process or in either a line item or each area, depending on which department it's for. But then the next thing is we're going to have to have that facility group monitor. So when those costs come in, they can come in and say, hey, there's this much over. We'd like to go to this next project. There's got to be that monitoring system so we can go to the next project if there's money left over from those previous capitals, which I think is the way it should be done.
Right.
So we got to figure out how to make that work and that type of thing. So
Mr. Chairman.
go ahead, Commissioner Lloyd.
Yeah, and I think as we move into the ad valorem tax changes and how we will receive our funding in the next couple of years, I think that process becomes more important because having some of those payments come in month to month and not having the yearly, the lump sums that we get, being able to say, hey, these projects are 1, 2, 3. We think this year, based upon projections, we could do 9 projects, but we may have to say only 1 and 2 happen in June, and we're going to hold on 3, 4 until we see what the ad valorem payments are in July and August before we move to the next. So I think this process even becomes more important as we go into ad valorem. And I think you're right. Now we just have to figure out the best way to make it work in all worlds.
Go, Gene.
The other thing that we're thinking of as a committee is if we can get this going, we can be out 4 or 5 years on capital. Now, it's not 100% crystal ball, but payroll, Brenda and Gary can do payroll with 5 years out within 5%. Operating hasn't really changed. Capital goes up and down so those short times ad valorem tax comes in separately, we can prioritize out there and we can actually look ahead and, everybody's got to share the pain, but they also got to share the wealth.
There you go. I agree. And what you're talking about, that's a note I've made as a follow-up when we finish with our budget for this year. How do we move forward going into 21, 22? And I'll have some comment for that so the other commissioners can comment on it. Bonnie, what we need to do, please come forward. You're right. And so is the facilities committee with regard to monitoring dollars. In your system, is there some way in how where we have the capital lists ahead before they're in the budget?
Yeah, I mean, we can do it.
And
My concern was going to the one line item and just direction on how it goes into the budgets. When I heard some of the concerns, because like I said, I don't like to change things just to change things, because every time you change stuff, it messes with your comparative information, it messes with your analytical data. But if the concern is, like Marty said, you have this extra $250,000 that you didn't spend because it was money that you had over budgeted and the project came in a lot less. What we can do is we can, on the budget resolution, we can set up one line item and in the system have it in the different departments. That way it's still tracked, it's still in there, but that would allow us to not have to do a budget amendment every time something happens like that. But then it would require some communication that, oh, this one came in less. Okay, we have that much money to go down on the next one on the
could that
list.
communication result from meeting with the facility committee on a regular basis? So they work with you to track where those numbers are and those costs and things?
Well, I think it would just need to be reported to the capital committee,
Okay.
and the capital committee would need to report that to me.
Okay.
So say Marty does have a $500,000 project and it only does cost $250, then she would have to report that to the capital committee and say, hey, I have this extra money, and then we can reallocate it and spend it elsewhere without a budget amendment if we're doing it on one line, but we still have it within the department. So it's, for tracking purposes, it's still there.
So your mind is much younger than mine. It moves a lot quicker. So how would that work in your process we're following for budget?
For budget, so I guess we have, if we do that, we have two options. We could leave everything out, which I think was the intent this year, maybe. I don't know, because some people included it and some people didn't. We can have everyone leave everything out and just have this capital list. And then my hesitation with that is a lot of times, if it's not in there, it's not going to get budgeted for. That's my concern. But we could have.
They better pay attention.
It could just be included in the capital list, or people could include them all in their own budgets. I mean, if you've submitted a request and it was put on that year's, I think it should go in the budget. I think that's the cleanest way to do it. It's just include it in the budget. I don't know why you wouldn't include it in the budget, because if you're not including it in your budget request, then it's not going to get, you're not going to get it. So to me, it didn't make sense to not include it in the request for the budget, because if it's not included in the request for the budget, then you're for sure not going to get it. And if you don't want me to include it in the request for the budget, then why did you request it from the capital committee in the first place? That was where I was getting lost, was I felt like there was some anger towards me for putting stuff in that wasn't put in, yet, well, why did you request it if you didn't want it in the budget? I was a little confused by that.
Understand.
So.
Well, and was the comment after our last meeting was, hey, this is a new process. We got some bumps to work out. So everybody be patient. So thoughts, commissioners? How about some accounting minds?
I think that I don't like just leaving it in with operating budget, because I think we need to approve, honestly, in my opinion, we need to go through and we need to approve budgets without capital. And then we go to the capital list when we know how much money we have left for capital. Because those are additional expenses. Otherwise, I mean, we're looking at people's positions and, paying heating bills and things like that. And so that is why I thought they shouldn't be included in the original request. I think that they need to be requested. But if we have them in the original request from each of the different entities or groups, then we're comparing big picture, and we really are trying to get a little bit more granular. So I think after we do the overview and we cut out everything we can in operating, then in personnel and stuff like that, then we can see how much we have left over, if anything, or how much we're willing to put into capital, and then pick those projects that'll fit under that. That's where my head is at with that.
Okay.
I'm
So
trying to think a little bit of what you have to do, Bonnie.
Well, and I'm just trying to eliminate the confusion. 'Cause
Yes,
things were
absolutely.
budgeted twice, things weren't budgeted at all, some things were, it's just, I think everyone was very confused. So, I guess kind of what, along the lines of what Lauren's suggesting, maybe not included in the department budgets. When people request it, they request it to the capital committee. And then I include just a kind of a, it's not a line item, it's just a made up, these are the capital requests. And I include that maybe in my summary where we have departments, component units, outside agencies, capital projects. And that way people are not including those in their request, but then if they do get approved, they go into their line items under capital.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Okay,
Would that work for you, Bonnie?
that will. And then are you okay with, to avoid the budget amendments, approving capital as a whole, but splitting it out in the departments in the system for tracking purposes? And I invited the capital committee too, because I would
Oh,
like
I'm
to
glad you
hear their
did. Thank you.
input, because they have
Yes.
different,
And
their
then I
brains
guess
work differently than mine.
there would be a capital, I mean, there would be a budget amendment if the capital committee needed overall more money. That's the only time we need to do a
Yes,
budget. Okay.
yes. If we were going to spend more money on capital than what was actually budgeted for
Sure.
in capital, we would need a budget amendment for that.
Okay. I like that.
Mr. Legursky. Come on up.
The only thing that I request, and Marty brought this up, debt service, it is capital,
Yeah.
but I think it should be a separate obligated debt service. Should be separate line item because we know we have to do that.
Okay, obligated.
So it's almost, it's like a 1A and a 1B, I guess. I don't know what that is. So
Hang on a minute. Wait till Bonnie. Bonnie, go ahead. Come on.
So is that going to be included on the capital list, or it's going to be included in the department? I was kind of just confused as to what you're.
well, it depends because obligated capital should already be in the budget.
In the
In the
department's
department
budgets,
budget,
in
we
their
already know that.
requests?
But a new
Okay.
debt service
Would
goes under
not
capital, but that
be-
should be broken out.
Okay, so there won't be obligated lease payments on your list.
We have it on our list just because we wanted to know. But yeah, it won't be on the list. It should be in the departmental budget. 'cause we already know
Okay,
what
so
those
the
are.
departments are going to budget for that.
Yes.
Okay, because we need to communicate this to everyone.
Well, and that's fine too. That's why from this point on, it'll be important for you to be at those facility meetings and that's because there should be a section where the facility group is reviewing any concerns with budget, capital budget and those types of things. So I think once you guys as leaders sit down, a lot of these questions and procedures that will help it run smoother for you and everybody can be determined within that meeting and then recommended to us and let us know what's going on. Does that make sense, Bonnie?
Mhm.
Okay. All right, so,
Okay, so
Mm.
obligated lease payments, the departments need to include those
okay, hang on
in
a
their
minute.
budgets.
Hang on a minute. Gene, listen carefully, and Marty, facilities. Say that one more time, Bonnie.
The obligated lease payments, the departments will include those in their budgets,
Very good.
right? Okay, and then everything else, any new requests will not be included.
Right.
And those will just go straight to the capital committee. So the obligated lease payments, they're not sending requests on that for you. You're just giving them the amounts, right, Marty? Okay. Okay, that was. Right, right, for those ones, yes.
I agree.
Okay,
All right, so that piece is taken care of. Review the steps with us one more time as moving through with the rest of the capital. Keep in mind, are we talking capital above a certain amount of dollars?
yes, it's just going to be the threshold that the capital committee set up.
Okay. Hang on a minute. Okay, hear this committee.
So Doc asked the question, is there a certain dollar threshold? And I just said it's the threshold that the capital committee set up.
Well, we basically broke it up $10,000 and above. Anything that we capitalize.
Well, but you also included multiple
We did
small
like
items.
small item like computers,
Right.
because we didn't know, I mean, if I buy 5 computers, he buys 6, he buys 3. I don't think you guys understand how many computers we buy. So if we need to buy 86 computers this year. Can I hear me? We need to buy 86 computers, you guys need to know that.
Yeah, well, and also if one person has oversight on that 86 computers, we'll probably save some money in the ordering process. All right. Go ahead now. Anything over the $10,000
So
threshold.
this is just the parameters that the
Yep.
capital committee has
Yep.
set up. And have those been communicated to everyone?
Yes.
Okay. So that, I don't think there was any confusion on that part.
No, so we're good there. But I
Okay.
think in the future, when you're involved, those are questions that can be covered
Okay.
as well.
All right. So the obligated lease payments are still going to be included in the department budget requests
Yep.
next year and going forward. And then the smaller items that don't meet that threshold are going to be included in the department budgets.
Yep.
And then anything that meets the threshold for the capital committee is just going to be included in a list. And then I won't put it in there, but I will include it on my summary of budgeted
us to prior
items,
towards.
just so we know it's there, just so it doesn't get overlooked completely.
Yep.
And then when you want to start cutting the budget, you can cut it out of there if you want. Okay, does that work for
I
everyone?
hope at some point in time, it's an ability to put things back in.
Well, I like to put it all there at the beginning because I think it's easier to put everything in there and then cut than to not put in there and then you're supposed to cut, but then you want to add more stuff and that's just hard to add stuff when you're short.
I get it. Very good. Commissioners, any questions for Bonnie regarding capital? So we'll have a list of stuff to look at eventually. Yes, Commissioner Smith.
I'll just say to all of those out there that are nervous and anxious about, this whole process and us coming down on you. And it happens to us as commissioners as well. And Commissioner Lloyd took his spanking very well, I think, and I think he's doing okay. So
I apologize. This has been a very frustrating process for many involved,
We
this
couldn't- we
whole
couldn't guess.
capital
you
change.
could not have guessed.
I
You're-
was very subtle about
Glad
it.
you're part of the committee now.
No, but you
Welcome
but you know
aboard.
what? The one thing I appreciate, Bonnie, you didn't just bring a problem, you also helped bring solutions. And that makes it a lot easier.
Thank you.
So keep that up, please.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. So anything else with capital discussion? Cash carryover discussion. Bonnie?
Okay, the reason I put this on here, I spoke with Lauren last week and she wanted to talk about this. I think there was a little bit of confusion about this too. So I don't know if you want to kind of explain this, Lauren, or do you want me to talk about it or? Okay.
Yeah, so I just had discussions, the museum specifically, had stated, and Dave's going to be here to talk to us later, but they were going to be able to survive with the cuts if they were able to keep their cash carryover. Now, I know in the past, we haven't ever requested that money back. And I know a lot of our different agencies have a need to have that because they don't get their checks until later. And so they have to have a certain amount of cash on hand to carry them through for that. So I just wanted us to all be on the same page and giving the same messages to everybody. So that's kind of where I was at with it.
Okay, commissioners, any comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes. Commissioner
the
Lloyd.
only thing I would say about that would be, I think we still need to be diligent at looking at what cash on hand is, because I think in some of the requests we have, there are organizations that have significant cash on hand, and it almost looks like the money we're giving them is the savings account. Like they have more in reserves than they actually are requesting in some cases, or similar amounts. And I think that's the only thing we need to be careful on that with, is that as we allocate, we be diligent and have those discussions with agencies so we don't become the additional savings.
Thank you, Commissioner Lloyd. Any other comments, commissioners? The only thing I'd like to add to it is very similar to what Commissioner Lloyd had said. First of all, for the agent or outside agencies, component units that may get additional funding from other sources other than just the county, it's hard to figure out which money that's in their carryover was provided by different groups. But I think it's very important to also consider the fact that they may need, and Bonnie, you've been a great advocate for this, that to make sure they have enough in their carryover so they can meet their payments until their checks come in. For those that we provide funding for entirely, if they have significant cash carryover and that cash carryover has been built up because of county funding, my question becomes, why are they the bank for our money and we're not? Second of all, if it's a statutory required funding unit, then they have every right to come and ask for a budget amendment if they need something. So my feeling is we've never said much over the years. We've kind of watched it and let it go. Haven't said much. But if there's significant cash carryover, now's the time for them to start spending part of it. And if they don't become players in that aspect, that's when you force, I believe, us as commissioners in a corner and say straight across the board, 20%, period. We're not going to deal with it because people don't want to be part of the solution. If you're going to be part of the solution and you have excess carryover and we've funded you, it's time to come to our aid. We have come to everybody's aid over the years because we've been able to. And we believe in what they're doing. Now it's time to come to the county's aid. And that's the best way I can put it. So cash carryover depends on what's going on, who they are, who they get their funding from. But there's an expectation they need to start spending it instead of building their accounts based on county revenue that could impact statutory mandated funding. Thank you. Anybody else want to say anything? Is that your answer? Is that what this was?
Do you want to hear my comments?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
Okay, well then, that was for the commissioners. Thank you. I know you believe that it's the taxpayers' money. It ought to go to the taxpayers. I respect that without a doubt. I understand that. But at the same token, we also have to be ready for any catastrophic incidents that could occur in the county. So
No, I agree. No, my opinion is I guess a little bit different. I don't think they're not being team players. I think there's two reasons for those big cash carryovers. I think one is the lack of understanding between the cash carryover versus the budget. Some people don't take that into account and they're budgeting for their revenues and they want them to match their expenditures, and that piece isn't taken into account. So I think there's kind of a lack of understanding how those all work together. I think that's one reason. I think the second reason is generally, well, always since I've been here, it's been kind of across the board cuts. So if people are going to be team players and say they have an excess of $200,000 in their cash carryover, they don't want to reduce their request by 200,000 when the next year the commission's going to be like 20% cuts. And you're like, well, I reduced it 20,000. So the 20,000, I spent more than 20,000. So it really should be a reduction of 20,000 off of my request last year plus 200,000. And it hasn't ever been that. So I don't think if they're going to be team players, be like, yeah, we'll spend some of our cash carryover, that they need to be held accountable to cut another 20% after they've used that 200,000 out of their own reserves.
and historically, that's how we've operated.
It is.
I know
has
it
been
is.
Since
I
I've
know it
been
is.
here, and this is my 10th budget.
Well,
so
it's maybe it's time that we start keeping track of that. So next year when we roll into it, we can know who's who and where that's all at. I don't have any problem with that. Somebody's got to keep track of it.
mhm.
And if you
I
wish
can
to
do that.
if you wish to do that, then that's
That'd be awesome.
fairly good. Because I know a year ago, I don't remember what group it was, but anyhow, we told them to spend some of their cash carryover, hire somebody. Next time we come back, we cut it this last year. I know that occurred, and if I could have backed up on it, I would have. But again, too, in the situation we're at today, that would have been the wrong time to back up on it because it's proven to have been a bad, good move. I'll just say that. But no, what I'm saying is being part of the solution. I didn't say be a team player. I'm not quite there yet. That everybody's a team, not saying everybody's not a team player. I'm not there yet. But I am asking that, people have to be part of the solution, and asking for more when there is no more, I have a hard time with that.
Yeah.
Really do. Because we've not filled positions in core government. And probably over the next year, we'll have to look hard and fast at that, and plus some other things. No, core government component units have done a good job. It's time for the outside agencies to step up. It's the best I can say for right now until we get through it. Okay? All right. Anything else, commissioners?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just one other quick thought is I think sometimes folks have budgeted a little bigger to avoid coming back and asking for additional money in like a budget amendment. And I think as we've asked people to tighten their belts and be a little more thrifty in the situation, I think as a commission as a whole, I think we would be understanding that there could be a few more budget amendments than normal and be open to those a little bit more if people are thriftier to the belt, because that's just part of the course.
Agreed.
If we ask people to tighten up and there's something big that happens in a department, we understand that there could be a budget amendment. So maybe we need to also change that paradigm of thinking that it is okay to ask for a budget amendment as needed within reason.
Agreed. And I don't think anybody disagrees with that. Okay? All right, reallocate reserve discussion.
Okay, this is something that I put on here, because right now we have a bunch of, line items for the reserves. And, I know we've been, we've had several discussions about reallocating those reserves. That has to be done through a motion, which cannot be done in a budget workshop. And we are planning on approving the budget following the next commissioner meeting, and 2 days after the next commissioner meeting. So the next commissioner meeting will be kind of the last chance to have a regularly scheduled Board of County Commissioners meeting to make that motion. So I didn't know how you wanted to allocate those, if you wanted to remove all of the current restrictions right now and reallocate those.
Do we have a copy of that for us to look
I
at?
don't have it. I could probably find you a copy of it. But I mean, this is just for you to think about. You don't have to decide right now.
Okay.
So I can send you a copy of it, but I just wanted you to be thinking about it and be prepared for it for the next meeting, and I will put it on the agenda for the next meeting. So your plan is to have $25 million in reserves. So you'll need to be thinking of an allocation for that 25 million. And then I figure what we have, well, and then you have the 8.2 million coming in for the rescue plan money. So be thinking about what you want to allocate that to. And then I figure the remainder will just be what will be spent this coming year and the 2 years after that to get down to that 25 million. So that'll just be used for operating and operations. So kind of think about what you want to allocate that 25 million plus the 8.2 million for.
How does that, how would that, Rob, you're sitting here. That planning, how does that fit into what we did today as far as our investment parameters?
Mr. Chairman, Rob Slaughter, Sweetwater County Treasurer. I believe at the last meeting a month ago, we talked about this very issue, and you had actually asked that we come up with a method for reallocating those reserves. Bonnie and I have not had a chance to sit down and talk about that to come up with those. I think we can do that. It fits in very well with what we had talked about. I think that the general feeling that Bonnie has had, and I don't want to speak for her, but if I'm wrong, let me know or let them know, is that we need far fewer of these reserve accounts and that we just have general reserves. So I think we can come up with, maybe it's 1 or 2 or 3 accounts that we have those in rather than, what is it, a dozen now potentially or something like that, and bring that back for you to look at. So I think we can do that if that's what you would prefer. And I'm more than willing to do that. It's just a matter of finding the time to do it. We've been, I think with her and the budget and me with all of these bankruptcy issues that we've had going on, we haven't had a chance to get together yet. So.
Okay, and within that, at some point in time when that was possibly a conversation a couple of years back, there may have been an indication that one of those reserve items was related to maybe a special tax of some sort.
Mr. Chairman, I think if you go back to the workshop that I did 2 months ago, I had made a suggestion as to what I thought we could potentially do. I think I had 3 or 4 separate reserves that were listed in there. One of those, I think what you may be referring to, would be a reserve that we would have when Senate File 60 goes into effect, which it has now. We start the monthly distribution and collection of ad valorem taxes. There are going to be shortages at some point in the future. We anticipate that there will be a time that production and price will be less than what was anticipated. And so one of the things that was suggested, I suggested a reserve for that, potentially something, a $2 million reserve there. I think I had suggested potentially a health reserve fund, also in addition to the health fund that we currently have. Just giving you some ideas, not saying that that's what we want to do, but I think the one that you're referring to is probably the one to replace those funds for not necessarily the 12 mil for the county, but those other districts that are going to be underfunded potentially when that takes place.
Yeah, that was one of them as we build that new reserve account. But I believe the way the reserve account is lined up now, one of those accounts was shared, and I'm not sure it's true or not, may be tied to a special tax, special, like a 6 penny or something. No, nothing, Bonnie?
I don't
Okay,
believe there's
very good.
anything that's there.
They're all in separate funds. Okay. Forget I asked.
They're
I
all
just,
general reserves. So.
okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Questions, commissioners? Anything else regarding the reserve? You got-
Rob and I can get together
Yeah.
and kind of come up
Would
with
you
some
please?
ideas. And if you just plan on making a motion at the next meeting, if you do want to get those changed before the budget is approved.
All right,
So,
sounds good.
but yeah, we'll get together and we'll come up with some ideas. I don't know if you were talking about the impact tax, the 6 penny tax, but those are all in separate funds.
They're all in
So,
separate funds. Very
yes.
good. Thank
So
you.
that's not part of
All right,
this.
that's good to know.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, going on,
right.
budget overview.
Okay, I'm gonna pass these out now. Did you want a copy, hard copy? I emailed this to you right before the meeting.
No,
I printed mine up.
Okay, I like hard copies because I like to take notes.
Thank you.
And does anyone else want one? Don, would you like one? Okay, so budget overview. We are a few minutes behind, so I'll try to get us caught up. Let me bring this up. Oh. No? All right, maybe I won't bring it up and we'll save it for, I'll go get it. I'll go try to save it again during the break. Okay, so from what you can see on that first page, so I actually updated this today, even though it says 5/28/21, I didn't update that. So this is a little bit different from what I sent you on Friday. So we have our revenues, and then we have the department, component unit, outside agency numbers. So total expenditures, 46,916,773. The difference between the revenues and those expenditures is we're short 11,391,303. Grant revenues, $2,112,681. Grant expenditures, $2,492,910. So we have a shortfall there as well. The total shortfall is 11,771,532. So that's a big number. Our cash carryover has been increased. So right now we're projecting 3.1 million. We did just collect that Southland payment today. I was a little nervous about that, but that did come in this afternoon. So that is factored into that cash carryover amount. And then this is a number that I've been playing with the numbers just to get us to 25 million after 3 years. And this is the number that I came up with. Rob's coming up with a different number. We agree to disagree a lot. So
He's leaving anyway. So.
this, we get along great. We really do agree to disagree a lot. It's great. So this is the number I came up with, just based on a 3-year projection. Of course, 3 years from now, I don't know what's going to happen with revenues, but I can guess. And so can Rob, and I ran my guesses by him. So I'm figuring we can use $7 million out of reserves and still hit that $25 million target to use that $7 million this year. So if we go with that, which we can do whatever you want, this is your decision, not mine, we would still need to cut out another $1.6 million.
Commissioners, any questions?
I'm curious what Rob's number
Yes.
is.
Yeah.
No offense, Bonnie, but yeah.
You can ask whoever.
Remember, I'm gone. So,
Is yours in paper and writing like hers, though? That's
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, you have to realize, I guess, things have changed very dramatically over the last month. We received the Southland royalty payment, which we did not anticipate. I think several of the entities out there are going to see in the next distribution that we make some of the additional funds that they had been counting on for their budgets that will come in that distribution. So it will help them. We have had the American Rescue Plan funds, which have been made available. We also have been told that we are going to receive an additional payment for those entities that are receiving PILT monies. And Bonnie has factored those numbers into this. I have not had a chance to really delve into this, but she and I have sat down and talked, and I don't disagree with her philosophy. No, let me say I don't disagree with her numbers. I disagree a little bit with her philosophy. And this is nothing new. We've been this way for 10 years. So, and we get along very well. We just see things a little differently. If you look at the numbers that she has got, what I am afraid of is I typically look at our cash carryover and our reserves as being one number. Because if you fund $3.1 million of carryover, that money would have gone into reserves. So in my mind, I see them the same. She doesn't. She sees them as two separate pots. Doesn't really make a big difference. But if you choose to fund this budget this year with $3.1 million of cash carryover and $7 million of reserves, my fear is that you're going to be right back where you were at the start of this year, when I've heard many of you say, we needed to cut more last year. We didn't do this. We needed to make more significant cuts. And what you would in effect be doing is kicking the can down the road somewhat. Now, in the plan that I had put together, I would have used less reserves. I would have made more significant cuts to this budget. And then looking forward to next year, you would have the ability to look at next year's budget and then at that point in time, adjust to what the situation is in that time frame. So just to generalize, I would say, in my opinion, that if the board cuts just strictly $1.6 million at this point in time, there's a high likelihood at some point in the future, you're going to second guess not cutting more at this point in time.
So what was your number for out of reserve?
Well, as I say, it's dramatically changed because we do have, Bonnie has factored in $1.5 million for each of the next 2 years as revenue for that PILT fund. We don't have any idea what that's going to be. I didn't have that number at all in my numbers. I did not anticipate we were going to receive Southland royalties, but we did. And actually, I do believe I just did a little math a little while ago. The district that money came in on, we actually have a little bit higher percentage of the tax than what we do in some of the others. So rather than we've been talking 16% of that money being county funds, it might be 19%. So there may be an additional $300,000 that Bonnie would like to have. So I'll let her know that now. So, I would just, I can't really give you a number without having had the opportunity to look at all of the changes that she's made within this budget. But I would once again think, when we talked at the last meeting, my number was about $5.6 million in carryover and in reserves. Now, obviously, with that money that's come in from Southland, to get that balance down to $25 million, there's an additional $2.2 million there. So I think you could probably change my number from 5.6 up to maybe 7.8 in total, rather than 10.1, that the number that Bonnie's looking at. I know that's a lot deeper cuts, and I know that makes your job a lot more difficult, but I think in the future, it will make your job a lot easier. And I think you will see the benefit of that if you look at doing it now. So that's kind of my thinking.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for Rob? One other thing, when you get the breakdown for where the Southland royalties is going and that type of thing, what entities will receive, will you get a report?
We will receipt that tomorrow, Mr. Chairman. When I do, I will bring you a list of all of the distribution on that.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Questions, commissioners? Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I have a question for Bonnie, though. So am I jumping we're doing rotate the mic, but
Well, I give him better news than you do. You only need to cut 1.6
he's given us bad news
million.
twice today. That's 2 times he's given us bad news today. All right. Hey, Bonnie, I guess my only question is, with your concept, and you and I had a chance to really have a discussion about this the other day. When I look at taking $7 million out of reserves, that would only give us like $2 million out of reserves next year. Am I correct? To
Yeah, I
balance the
actually-
budget?
I have a spreadsheet and I will, during the break, I will go get that and maybe we can review this again at the end.
Okay.
Unless you want to review it sooner. This didn't save to my jump drive. I talked to Rob just right before this to get that Southland amount and was trying to throw all this together really quickly and it didn't save on my jump drive. So I can show you kind of what I'm looking at and explain it to you. But I don't have it right here right now.
And
So
that would
we'll do
probably help me at least. Just because
Okay.
I know when we talked about it, it made sense. And then when I looked at the number, I thought, oh my gosh, we're only going to have $2 million in reserves next year to help with the budget.
Yeah.
I really kind of felt like what Rob just said, like right where we are at now. I would feel like we would walk backwards to where we were last year to this year. And I'd be fearful that it would be really ugly at the beginning again.
Okay, well, let me just throw in were you going to talk about we're missing 4 months of revenue this year that is for sure coming
Absolutely.
back.
Mhm.
So that's going to help a lot with the next 2 years. So I
Yeah.
did take that into account. I'll let Rob speak now.
That's not what I was going to talk about. But just what Bonnie is talking about, I think I can summarize fairly quickly for you rather than having to wait for that if you want. Well, she's anticipating that the revenue for fiscal year 23 will be increased from $37 million to $44 million. She's anticipating our expenditures at $47 million. So she's projecting a deficit for fiscal 23 of $3 million. The projected cash carryover that I had used in my presentations had been $1.5 million. She used that number and would anticipate then you'd only need to use $1.5 million of reserves for next year's budget. For fiscal 24, she's once again anticipating a revenue increase. Now, once again, she's using that money from the PILT fund, the additional money coming in that, and that's where the increase is coming in. She's anticipating $45 million in revenue and $47 million in expenditures. So once again, $1.6 million that you would have as a deficit. With that $1.5 million in carryover that we anticipate, there'd just be $158,000 to get you to the $25 million balance that she's talking about. Now, my concern once again would be with respect to that still does not get you to a balanced budget. And you're not going to have that revenue from that PILT after fiscal year 24 either. So that's another $1.5 million that you'd have to take out from this. So there are just several concerns, lots of different ways to look at this. I think once again, Bonnie's numbers are great. I'm just a little bit more conservative than she is, I think, with respect to these issues. So.
Thank you, Rob. We'll wait for Bonnie to get back. Unless anybody's got any questions for Rob.
While we're waiting, Mr. Chairman, too, something that we should talk about to make you aware of too, with respect to that Senate File 60, as Bonnie brought up, we will have 4 months, January, February, March, and April of 2022, where we do not receive the mineral tax revenue. There is anticipated that there will be a shortfall. The legislature anticipated that and has appropriated funding through the state treasurer's office so that that money would be available to borrow to fund those. The way this is currently set up, I believe Bonnie is intending to fund it through our budget and using our reserves. That's fine also. It's just that money would be available, and it's anticipated that money would be used for the county's 12 mil, for the school funding other than their 25 mil and their 6 mil. and all of the special districts which are outstanding for that 4-month period, because they will not be receiving any revenue for that 4 months. I shouldn't say that. Any mineral tax revenue for that 4 months.
So at what point or how long, the money that we would take out of reserves to handle that 3-4 month period, what's the return on our dollars timeline?
So we will start, it's anticipated that we will start receiving payments of 8% of the total tax which is due for the second half of calendar year 20's production and calendar 21's production. We're anticipating that's going to be about $100 million in total. So we're looking at potentially about $1.5 million in an annual payment each year for the general fund, or excuse me, for the 12 mil levy. So we can anticipate receiving about $1,500,000 in December of 2023, and each year thereafter for 12 years. So we'll be receiving that. And there's nothing that money is currently appropriated for unless we were to use that money to fund loans or something through the state treasurer.
All right, thank you. Okay, Ms. Berry? Any questions for Bonnie regarding what we see of the budget overview? I got a couple, please.
Okay.
The cash carryover of $3.1 million you have listed, that includes Southland that we
Yes,
just heard. At
that does, yes,
about
that is
2.1,
correct.
2.2.
Yes.
Plus, what is the, what else is in there?
So we have, so I'll just start from last meeting. I had 500,000 in there.
Yeah.
So it's gone up because I ran a new cash carryover projection. So we're estimating more revenues than I had projected, and we're anticipating the expenditures to be a little bit lower this year. So the under budgeted expenditures will go in there. So that made up about another 600,000 of it.
1.1.
1.1.
You said another 600.
Oh, yes.
Or
You're
went
correct.
from
So you're
5
adding
to
the two together.
600 or
Yes.
from 5 to
Yes.
1.1?
So there's about a 1.6 million in there for the Southland.
Rob just told us there should be 2.1.
He told me 2.2, but that was the full 12 mils. So this is just the county's money. I'll let Rob talk about it.
That's very good. Well, no, we need to know this. We're talking $500,000.
Yeah, typically we round that number, Mr. Chairman, when we look
Sure.
at what the general or what the county receives for the 12 mil on those levies. And so if we look at the total amount, and I'm going to give you an exact number, so I don't want to give you an incorrect number here. It was $37 million in change. So if we use $37 million and we multiply that times the 16% that I have typically used for what the 12 mil is going to receive. Why am I getting that number? That's not right.
I got 5.9.
$5.92 million. Yeah, and that's not, I'm missing something in our equation here. Yeah, that's, the 37 million was another issue. I'm sorry. It's 13.7 million is our number. I'm sorry. Trying to do this from rote memory, and it doesn't work that well.
$2.192.
2.192. So that was the 2.2 million that I had referenced. But in looking at that district, just when I left just a few minutes ago to grab the additional revenue projections, I looked at the district that we received that money from, and in that taxing district, we're actually receiving closer to 19% of the tax revenue, because the mill levy is actually 0.62 mils in that versus the 70 mills that we use on an average basis. So rather than $2.192 million, we would be looking at about $2,603,000. So about $400,000 more than what we had anticipated due to, once again, the county's 12 mil being a higher percentage of that district than what we had used in what we had projected originally. So I believe, Bonnie, you said you used 2.1 million.
So I used the 2.2, but then
Okay.
that was the full 12 mil you told me. So then I calculated that by the amount of mills the county actually gets.
Which was 8.7 mils last year. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I came up with 1.6.
And there, and as I say, it would be an additional $400,000 based on, once again, a rough percentage of what the 12 mil is in that district where we receive those funds.
2.6. And then, okay, thank you. And then with, since the last meeting, you had 500,000, right, Bonnie? And now you anticipate,
Yeah, so 500,000 plus the 600,000 that we went up in between revenue and expenditures from last time I calculated it. So 1.1 plus this 1.6 million from Southland. 1.6 million.
I thought it was 2.6.
It is, but Rob told me 2.2 for the full 12 mils, so I only added 1.6. So I'm gonna have to add probably another, a little bit more.
Okay, so you're gonna take it up to 2.6.
Well, for the full 12 mils, but we don't get the full 12 because it's just, no, it's distributed to the events complex, Southwest Counseling, all the component units. So we only get 8 point something mils.
Hold on for a second. That's what I was worried about.
But this is revenue that we budgeted for last year. This isn't additional revenue.
No, I know.
Okay.
Just went into an arena that I think warrants some discussion is there may be a mill level levy listed for the hospital and the Sweetwater Events Complex in your budget, like, and it shows how much, like 1.8 or whatever those numbers are. Okay, that sends an entitlement that they get that 1.8 if that's what it was.
They do. They get that portion of the mill levy, yes.
Who authorizes that portion?
You do.
When?
At the budget
Very good.
hearing.
That's entitlement, which is not accurate. Because what it amounts to is we should be funding them based on their requests, not based on what their percentages of the mill levy.
You are. I recalculate that percentage of the mill levy every year based on what you approve.
Okay, that may be, but it doesn't mean they're entitled to this extra revenue that comes in. For instance, like
This-
right here.
This isn't extra revenue.
No, but, well, just a minute. The Southland carryover is extra revenue.
No, it's not.
Well,
It's revenue that they didn't pay before. So these
Paying it
component units
now.
have been short because when we budget it,
but we've been carrying them through their budget as a county to make up for that.
no, we haven't. They,
Well, I think we need to have a conversation with commissioners if that piece of it, when I see it on the budget, if we want to continue to do that.
okay, last year, the component units did not get everything that you awarded them because because we didn't collect all of the 12 mils. There were, our accounts receivable our taxes receivable skyrocketed.
We should have the opportunity to determine if, when this money comes in at the end of the budget, if that's what we're going to, if we're going to give that money to them, whether they need it or not, because they're through their budgets.
But it's part of the 12 mil, so you've already allocated that, so it has to go to them.
I'm not thinking on the same page as you are. It's obvious. Rob's smiling. He knows what I'm talking about.
I think I can clear this up.
Please, I hope so.
Mr. Chairman, I believe the confusion comes in the fact that you have a component unit, let's use the events complex, for example, and they will make a request to you for this year, $2.1 million.
Okay.
Okay. What you do at that point in time is you look at what a mill levy takes based on our valuation to create that $2.1 million. So with a valuation this year of let's say it's $1 billion, you back into the amount that a levy will create to give the events complex $2.1 million. So when you do the budget, you're allocating that percentage of our 12 mil, in this case, like 1.5 mils of our 12 mil, to fund $2.1 million for the events complex. So that's how the process is done at that point in time.
Okay, so bear with me, Bonnie, okay? When we get to that request of 2.1 and it reflects that portion of the mill so far, if we come back as a commission and say, hey, we want to reduce by, let's say, 500,000, then that mill is going to reflect differently, correct?
Correct. It will decrease by that amount of that percentage when you back into that. So rather than using 1.8 mils, it would probably be closer to 1.3 mils.
And I guess where I'm struggling with is where in that process does it?
Can I say, I think,
Yeah.
so with the Southland money coming in, have we already allocated that to them and it's just now coming in? So it's already been allocated?
Yes and no.
Uh-huh.
Oh.
It's yes, but treasurer?
Well, there are multiple years that are factored into this. So the revenue for this year is subject to a separate mill levy. And what they receive on a portion of this money will be allocated to this year's mill levy. A portion of it will be allocated to last year's mill levy, and we'll go back to them. It's money that they did not receive for last fiscal year. So in that case, it will actually be unanticipated.
It'll be unanticipated, but
That
if we know,
portion of it.
if we know what that amount is based on their budget request, they get that. And then we decide whether we continue
So-
to meet their.
So it's very simple. I think your question, if I can read your mind, which I've been trying to do for a long time, I've done pretty good, I think. If the events complex, let's say, asks for $2.1 million and you feel like they should not necessarily be entitled to $2.1 million, and you believe that $1.5 million is that number, you would apply $1.5 million to the current levy, come up with that. And then whatever was not used to fund that portion of the levy for the events complex would go back to the general fund levy and
Okay.
increase the general fund by that amount.
All right. Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All righty.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead. Commissioner
question
Lloyd.
on that. So that sounds really convoluted and difficult to me. So that makes me wonder, and and granted, remember, I am a psychology, sociology guy, so I am not good with numbers. I have professed that over the time. But I guess it brings me, and I think there was a time when the commission used to do this. In one of my conversations, Bonnie or Rob, we talked about one of the two we talked about with this last week, I think, and maybe it was a different conversation, was instead of allocating to each agency, why wouldn't we then just say, put what our allocation was to them to the general fund, so we would be able to be more exact to the dollar rather than based on the rotation of the mill levy? Because last week, when I was at a component board meeting and they came to get their check, it was because mostly of the Southland situation, it was $250,000 less than they anticipated because the Southland money wasn't in. So it showed how that mill levy allocation negatively affected them more than it did positive affect them. So I guess why don't we just do it on the component agencies and stuff to the general reserves, and then we give them the exact amount. So if there was overage, it would come back to us.
I'll let Rob answer that one because that's a treasurer question.
Another excellent question. I believe it's a budgeting philosophical discussion. There have been times in the past where we have allocated funds from the general fund to fund a component unit. There have been times when we have done it by mill levy. There are counties who do it each way throughout the state right now. So, I would believe that there are probably some counties that allocate the full 12 mills for county government operations. Then they would then allocate whatever they choose to for any of those human service agencies or component units from that number. But it's just been a budgeting philosophy for Sweetwater County that what we have done is used a mill levy to create that revenue for those entities over the last several years.
Thank you, Rob. I was just reading the chat line and that type of thing. Thank you, Candy Pendleton. Okay. So on your cash carryover line it will be different than 3.1 million probably, that you present?
Yes, it will go up a little bit
Okay.
with that number changing. Yes.
Okay, then go to, yeah, woo-hoo, good job.
Yeah.
Okay, go to your reserves. What do you have in there?
For,
Just that 7 million. You say we're gonna use
Yes.
7 million of our reserves.
okay, going to this spreadsheet that's up on the screen right here, and I also emailed it to you too, just a few minutes ago, if you want to look at it on your own screen. So this is how I came up with the $7 million to use this year. So, I took what Rob presented a few months ago, 2 months ago or so. I basically copied his spreadsheet and made some changes because it had some assumptions that things were going to be flat, and I put in some of the things that I knew about and some things that I guessed. So this is kind of what I came up with. We know our revenue is going to go up a lot next year because we're missing 4 months of revenue this year for the minerals. So I have, and I put on the bottom there how I came up with the number. So basically, the reason we go from 37 to 44 million, 37.6 to 44 million next year is I have fiscal year 22 revenue plus 4 additional months of, that should be ad valorem tax. Sorry, I didn't correct that. Plus the anticipated increase in revenue of 1.2 million. And Rob gave me that number, so you can blame him if that's wrong. And then this is my complete guess. I put in 1.5 million for the estimated rescue plan. This is the PILT money. This is not the 8.2 million. This is just the PILT portion. As Rob mentioned, that the counties that receive PILT are going to get additional PILT money for this through the rescue plan. We have no idea how much we're going to get. We do know that $1.5 billion has been allocated for it, but it's not going to be distributed in the same manner that PILT is distributed now. It's going to be completely different, and they have not come up with how they're going to do that yet. But last year they distributed like just over 500 million in PILT. So it's 3 times the amount of what they distributed last year. And last year we got, how much did we get last year? 3.4 million. So I figured 3 million over 2 years was a safe estimate. So I put 1.5 million in for both of them. I mean, if it was the same, it would be $10 million. So, but I put in 3 million.
And that's our regular PILT, right?
Our regular PILT's 3.4.
4.
So this is 3 times the regular PILT, but it has completely different parameters of how it's going to be dispersed.
Rescue money is 3 times regular PILT is what you're hearing?
The PILT rescue money.
Yes, PILT rescue money is
Yes.
3 times the
The
regular.
total amount, but
Oh,
that
okay.
doesn't mean that's what we're going to get
Is
because
it
we don't know
good?
how it's going to be allocated.
Yeah.
So it's
Is
really
it
hard
good
to budget for.
It'd be good to budget for, but it's kind of
How
worrisome.
to budget something because we know we're going to get something, but how much do you budget for? I don't really want to budget for $10 million.
No.
So I figured 3 million. It's a little bit less than what we normally get when we know the total disbursement is going to be 3 times as much, almost 3 times as much as what it normally
If you'd
is
have to guess,
in total.
that seems like a
Figured
pretty
it was a-
conservative guess. you know.
I
I
thought
think it's a
so.
good guess. My concern is if it comes in less, then we'll have to figure it out,
Yeah,
right?
we will. But we have a couple years to do that.
If it comes in more,
I
we'll have to
sure
figure it out
hope
too.
you're right. I sure hope you're right.
I hope I'm wrong, and I hope it's a lot more.
I do too. Well, I see where you're coming from, but I hope you're right that we'd get that much.
So anyway, I know it seems like a big jump, but we know we're going to get the extra 4 months. So I've got that of the ad valorem and then the 1.2 million. And Rob said we already are seeing some increases in that. So that's why he's saying the 1.2 million. So that's where that number came from. And then the next year after that, I just have added in 1.5 million. So I have fiscal year 23, and then for fiscal year 24, I have the same number as fiscal year 23, but then I just added in another 1.5 million for that 8% ad valorem tax we're going to collect. Because we know, well, we hope we're getting all that.
Rob?
Here comes Rob. Just one more point, and this is once again a different philosophy. The way I would have looked at this with the additional money that we receive from PILT, I would look at doing the same thing that you're talking about doing with the American Rescue Plan money.
Put it aside.
Set it aside and see what the money actually is and then allocate it at that point in time. Now, that to me just seemed like that would be
Well, and
how I would.
And if you
would wanna
talk,
look at it and see what
yeah,
that
and
is.
if you talk with any of the grant managers, they're saying wait until the sideboards come in and you'll have a better picture.
Well, the Treasury I know is really inundated and they're working on, how they're going to
Yeah.
distribute this. We have no idea. And Bonnie's way of doing that is as good as any. And this is, her way of calculating this budget is just as good as mine. It's just a different way. We just look at it.
Yeah, I
differently. So
agree.
That's
I
just how.
agree.
I think that's a compliment, Bonnie. It's as good as anyway.
It was my good as any. My guess is as good as any. Okay, and then for the expenditures, I figured if we come down to this highlighted number, the 47.7, and what's going to change, if we can get down to there, that's how I came up with how much more we need to cut in that reserve number. That's how I got that number, because that reserve that you saw in that summary comes down, the reserve, what we can use out of reserves comes down to that reserves necessary to fund budget number on that 7 million. So for the expenditures, I know that what we're giving the airport extra this year, that's going to go away. That's a one-time thing, just that extra 600 and something thousand. 627,000. So I took that out next year, but we do know that we're going to have an increase because it is an election year. So I added another $123,000 in for that next year. So, so going off of these numbers, obviously we have some changes, and we're going to have more as time goes on. We'll be aware of more, but that's where I got these numbers. I just figured it so that bottom number on fiscal year 24 gets you down to 25 million. And again, that 8.2 million for the rescue plan is not in here at all. So our reserves actually will be 33.2 million, 25 plus the 8.2, if we don't use any of that. So that's my philosophy. Very different than Rob's,
All right, thank you, Commissioner.
but it's your decision. So
Oh, thank you very much.
100% your decision. I'll remind you of that.
And we're
Gonna
glad
sing
to
a
own
song.
it.
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead, Commissioner.
Are there, so I'm looking at your cash on hand. Do you know off the top of your head, if any, which of these have obligations or requirements to hold a certain number of days cash on hand? And then also, what I would like both of your opinions, because I'm guessing they're going to be different. How many days cash on hand is, and I have a different opinion too after, working at the Y, but how many days cash on hand do you feel is appropriate for an entity to have?
Okay. So for the component units that get a portion of the mill levy, which is all of them except Board of Health, they need to currently, this is changing, but currently they need to have enough cash on hand to get them through November. So I say 5 months. I know the library, they say 120 days, which is more like 4. But they must have payroll at the end of the month, not the beginning, because they need to get that November and May disbursement. That's when they get the big dollars. They get very small checks. This is for the ones that most of their revenue comes from the county. Now, Southwest Counseling maybe can go less because a very small portion of their revenue comes from the county. But for the museum, for the library, for those ones that get a bulk of their revenue, pretty much all of their revenue from us, need to have 5 months. Just rule of thumb as an accountant, other entities that see more of this, the same revenues and expenditures month to month. I like to say 90 days. So anyway, I'll let Rob answer that in his different opinion.
Don't want anybody to fall out of their chair, but I agree with Bonnie. Virtually everything she
10 years
said,
in the making.
I would agree. That with one addition, this is not, I don't even disagree, but as we get into the new distribution of taxes, we will not need to have as much money to get these entities through that first 5 months. Once we get into fiscal 23 and we're collecting those on a monthly basis, they won't have to have as much on the 5 months that Bonnie had alluded to.
Thank you. And just so you guys are aware, I just sent an email to all of you
Go
that
ahead.
I calculated out what it would look like if these entities they went down to the 6 months of cash on hand. So
Thank
it's
you.
a significant amount.
Okay. Cool.
And I agree with Rob, and that's why I said right now, I would like to see this through for a year just to kind of see what we can bring that down to. But yeah, for now, I would plan on the 5 months, and maybe next budget year, or maybe even the following one, we'll see how this change impacts them.
Okay. Question?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, kind of a piggyback on what Commissioner Shanefield, the only thing I worry about really reducing some of their cash carryovers then would be the expectation in a couple of years of that organization that we would refund them when they got back. We would rebuild their funding to the normal level when they depleted that amount. And then we're really at no different spot than we are today than we were in the future than we are today. So if we have to do that, I think we also have to make sure they know that, hey, you can use your reserves, but this will be your amount. I think that's the one thing we have to be careful with, because I'm afraid if we force people to use that, too much of that without are they going to come back in a couple of years expecting us to reimburse that? Does that make sense? Or refund it at the level it was prior to when we made them use their cash reserves?
I think they would expect the funding at the level prior to when they use their
Yeah.
cash reserves.
So I think that if we do that, we still have to be able to say, hey, but this is the highest, X is the highest level we would ever be funding you again or whatever. So they have that expectation.
Well, I think that needs, whether they have a lot of reserves and you're having them use it now, or they don't and you're funding them now, I definitely think there needs to be a clear goal and a clear path to get there on what's going to happen in the future. I think we've been avoiding the elephant in the room for 10 years I've been here. And it needs to be addressed where we're going to go in the future with the funding of these entities.
I agree. I was meeting with an agency we fund in the last week, and the director of that agency said, every budget year we hear from the commission, doesn't matter who the commissioners are, it's going to be ugly next year. You're going to have to make significant cuts. It is what it is. And he said, in all the years I was running this organization, it never happened. When it happened this year, he goes, I was warned, but I never thought it would
Never
really
believed it.
happen because I was told this for all these years. And even though I felt the message was clear, there was still that little bit of hope in the back of his head that it would fix like it always has. So I do think giving organizations a concept that, hey, you're down 20% this year, but next year you need to be down another 20 or 30% is important. So
Well, and not just that, but coming up with a plan, a strategy of how they're going to get there too.
yeah, I agree. Because then they can look at efficiencies as they come up, and their grant funding, as Doc has alluded to.
But I mean, the commission needs to make that decision on the funding levels before they can plan for that.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Commissioner Smith.
I think in relation to that, I would look at things just slightly different, as they'll have a budget, and this is expenses, this is what we need, this is how things are run, this is our budget. Where the funding comes from, I think is not irrelevant, but if they're using their cash carryover and then their request to us is less, that's not what we need to look at. We need to look at, what is your budget? What does it take you to run this? And so if they use cash carryover this year, and then next year they're saying, well, I needed 500,000 last year, but I used 300 of my cash carryover. So you only gave me 200, and now you only want to give me 200 this year. That's not really the way I see it. I need to see their whole budget and say, this is what it takes to do our operation. And then we look at where the money came from, kind of separately.
Yeah, but without direction on how much funding they're going to get, though, they don't know how to get there because they don't know where they're going.
Yeah, I'm just trying to address Commissioner Lloyd's concern of.
No, that's
well,
my
if
concern too, and that's why I
if we use
was.
our cash carryover, then we're never going to get back to where we were. And I wouldn't see it that way.
Well, what you're basically saying is this is more than just a 3-month process.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It needs to be more than a 3-month process. It needs to start meeting with individual sooner.
Well, it needs to be more of a 3 to 5 year process.
Exactly. Then it moves into that. So, and I think
that's why I brought up that 3-year schedule. So, I mean, I brought up that, well, I copied it from Rob, but I brought up that 3-year projection, putting those numbers, because you did make a decision of 25 million in reserves and not to use the rescue plan money. So I made a way to get there. So that's what these outside agencies need too. They need a destination, and then they can figure out a way to get there. But without that destination, they don't know how they're going to get there. Well, they don't know where they're going.
and what does the destination look like for next year?
Flat.
Do you really believe that?
If we can cut out what I recommended, yeah. think it does look pretty flat. Maybe small reductions because there's always stuff that comes up. But it really depends on how much you can cut this year. So so I have in here to cut 1.6 million. Say you cut 2 million, that gives you 3.5 million, or sorry, 350,000, because you know there's going to be budget amendments. So it gives you a little bit of money. And then I think it would say fairly flat if you could do if you cut out 2 more million.
Okay, thank you. Okay. I sense that, but I was waiting for you to.
Or we could cut less and hope that revenues go up and maybe they will.
Well, and I think there's too many budgets built on that hope already, even at cities and towns. So, okay, anything? Great budget overview. Good job, commissioners. Good job, Bonnie and Rob, everybody that participated. So with that in mind, anything else regarding the overview, commissioners? All right, now we're prepared to visit with the groups. We requested to start coming in at approximately 3:45. And the first group, of course, is the commissioners. And with that, commissioners, I think we've had some time, I hope, but if not, we'll take time now to take a look at our personal budget as commissioners and see where we're at. I think Bonnie provided a overview for us in her packet.
Yes.
There is a way, and I believe I do have and I can send it, but there's also a breakdown of what the in operating and capital. I don't think we need to look at payroll because that's consistent and that type of thing. But I think in operating and capital, we can take a look at it, and I will open the floor up to commissioners. When you look at our budget, again, we need to be part of the solution. So with that, I'll open the floor up.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Lloyd.
Yeah, and I guess, we don't have a whole lot of capital, and operating could be cut, so, definitely in percentages with concepts of limiting travel and those concepts. But I know there's some statutory things, but I feel obliged that I would consider looking at maybe a 15 to 25% reduction of the commissioner's salary to help reduce some of the concern to show leadership in moving forward in a positive way. I know there's some statutory concerns in that, and it may be difficult to do, but I think it's a discussionary topic that could be broached.
Okay, commissioners. So you're starting out with that one. So you're proposing a conversation about cutting commissioner salaries. Legally, I think, John, you've had some opportunity to look at that. Might be a good place to start.
Yeah, there are concerns. It does say that the salary shall be remain the same for the commissioners that are on board. So the difficult part is you could have one commissioner that has a shorter amount of time available, is up for election at a shorter amount of time, setting a salary for somebody who's got a longer period of time. So there are some concerns there. And I certainly, as you make those decisions, bear in mind that the language does have some problematic language in that regard.
Somewhat problematic. Okay. Any comments, other commissioners?
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Commissioner Shanefield.
Bonnie, in our operating, because we obviously are doing less this year, no, more in 2021, and then we cut from 1920. Is that correct?
Your actuals for 2020 for operating were 95,000, a little over 95,000. 2019, your operating was 83,000. So your year to date is 76,000. So I would imagine that's going to be down a little bit. I would assume reduction in travel. So yeah, that is down. it probably will be down this year. These numbers are through the end of the month, their current number, well, as of Friday. So you only have one more month of operating left.
What's the, just out of curiosity, the capital requested, what's that?
There's none.
There's none, okay.
So yeah, if you look at the
Oh, there it is, I
third to
see it.
last column, it's 0.
Okay, 0.
Yes.
All right, so what are the operating expenses? Do you know offhand?
You've got, I think there's quite a bit in dues. I think there's, I don't know offhand. I would have
I
to
think I can
look,
pull that
but
up.
I looked earlier today.
I mean, are you just wanting like line item detail? I can bring that up.
Something like that, yeah.
Okay. Let me bring that up.
I have it up right now. Dues and subscriptions is 65 of that.
Oh,
Travel
wow.
and meals is 15,000. Those are the top 2.
What was the top one?
Dues and subscriptions.
What are the dues?
65,000.
But I mean, what, break them down.
Oh, it's not in here.
Yeah, it doesn't have the detail.
Do you,
I can get you that detail. Do you want me to email that to you later?
you know, I thought I had it. I just can't find it.
My suggestion would be to
think I-
figure out where we can whittle down that operating expenses, and maybe that means that we're gonna limit our travel. And be strategic about who's going to meetings and when, and that kind of thing. Because I think we can cut it back to similar to what we have this year in that area.
I think that's a good idea, because a lot of, we can go to Zoom meetings if we have at least one representative there or something.
I agree.
So with that in mind, what do you think, cut our travel to?
Well, hold on, let me do some math really quick.
I would also encourage from the standpoint, if there is something within state or whatever, first of all, out of state, maybe look at that as absolutely no out of state travel unless we talk about it.
So on this, your year to date, this was as of March. I have not updated this. Your year to date for travel was 3,864.
Mhm.
So almost 4,000. So,
But that's also included if, when I go to, let's say Farson Eden for Waste District and
Yes.
that.
yes.
So I would even go so far as to say this, because I think it'll overlap what Commissioner Lloyd's saying is, commissioners, we already get a salary for our work, for our service work. So we're already getting somewhat an additional pay to cover our travel if we wanted to say so. So from my standpoint, I all in-state travel, I'll pay for myself, whether it's even within county and that type of thing. And only because of the salary that we get as commissioners, that will cover it. Not like gonna make or break me.
Right.
So I would encourage us as commissioners to look at our travel and possibly reduce, if not cut out, as much travel as possible, if not all of it. But also, the thing I will endorse is by statute, they are allowed to turn in travel. So if commissioner turned in travel and felt it, this is not something they wanted to abide by, this is not saying they can't. This is a volunteer thing that we will reduce our travel. For me, I'll pay my own travel. And we may need some money in our account for registration, like for conference or something like that for the WCCA. That's what I would think, and that would save that problem, Roy, with possibly looking at 10 or 15% cut in salary.
I think that would help. I think, but I don't think it hits that same level. But I think those are I think those are things we have to look at. I mean,
I agree.
I know for me personally, I think I've turned in maybe 3 vouchers since I've been a commissioner, because I know by statute we're allowed to, but my theory is when I used to work in Rock Springs and I drove from Green River to Rock Springs to work, I never got reimbursed my driving to go. And I know the statute says I can, but for me, I just kind of look at it as a built-in part of my salary, and not everyone has to look at it. It doesn't make any one decision more right than other, but that's the way I looked at it. And I think, and the reason I suggested a cut in the salaries is, honestly, when I ran for commission, I thought we got like $1,000 a month stipend, like a student, like a city councilman. And I'll tell you, I think I earned my keep. I do. But with that being said, I didn't do this to make money. I did this to serve the public. And as I'm sitting at meetings watching entities cut 50% of their employees and some way, I just thought it was a way I could show leadership and show that we understand where folks are at.
Good call. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Mr. Shanefield.
I would suggest that it would be potential to reduce that travel and meals down to 80,000, that's 19.5% cut out of that section,
80,000?
down to 80,000.
The total operating, is that what you're
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah, the total operating. So, sorry.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Down to 80,000. So you're cutting out 19,420?
Somewhere, yep.
Okay.
Figure out where that's
So-
gonna go. That brings us to the 20%, a little over total.
So what else is in there?
I don't know, we'd have to look at potentially advertising. I don't know what's in other.
Mommy?
I don't know either. That's something I would have to let you know. I think some of the expenditures for the WCCA meeting got put in there.
Yep.
I have a
Repairs
question.
and maintenance
Oh.
too, maybe, sorry. Repairs and
Go ahead.
maintenance may be something. I mean, we just moved everybody and hopefully don't have a lot. I don't know if that includes
That
professional services.
might include like a copier maintenance lease or
Yep,
something.
So we'll have to look
I'm
at
not
the
sure.
line items underneath a lot of these and see if we can get that done.
I can send that to you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Mr. De Leon.
Yes, Commissioner Tillman.
Well, if budgets keep getting tighter, I mean, what would it take to go back to 3 commissioners? Because that's where the money's going.
Where?
Yeah, I mean, you have the ability to go back to 3 commissioners. And I guess that would have to be something that you would have to.
It doesn't take a ballot referendum? Is that how we got here?
process.
If it's voluntarily done, is it different than if it's voted on?
I think it has to be voted on. I can
Yeah,
clarify that.
normally you
Commissioner.
have to have it voted on, and then it doesn't go until the next meeting where there's 3 of them up for election.
I
So it
can-
would take
I can
several years.
clarify that for you, Commissioner.
Well, if we're starting to look at really deep cuts, I mean, there's 5 of us. It costs a lot.
It would be several years, because I think
Right.
it's.
Commissioner Tillman's volunteering to step aside. apparently. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
It would
Because I
be-
know it has to go on the ballot, and then
I saw
after
that.
that, it
Well,
won't
it-
go
it
on
would-
until there's.
But it would have to take
3.
a majority of the vote of the commissioners to get it on the referendum. Is that correct?
I believe so. I will clarify.
Yeah,
Mr.
very good.
Chairman. But you do have the option at some point in time, you could modify salaries instead of, so you have different options available to you.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to just be a reduction in the number of commissioners. So you have 2 options there, and I will clarify the exact procedures. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Chairman Winley.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
And Mary, I don't think that, Commissioner Tillman, I don't think that's a bad idea. The only thing that I would worry about going to back to a 3-person commission, which once again, not opposed to, just looking at counterpoints to things, is when they went from 3 to 5 commissions, they actually 3 commissioners to 5 commissioners. They did that as a reason to move away from a county like administrator. And so I think one of the questions would be, if they went to 3 commissioners, would there be the ability to provide the oversight, and would they have to look at going back to a county administrator, which is probably a greater cost? Well, I know what they paid the county administrator. It was a greater cost than 2 commissioners. So that's, if we were ever to look at that 3-person model again, which I'm not once again opposed to, that would be one cost we'd have to look at potentially, is would we have to go to have more oversight? So.
Well, take it further. What are the unintended consequences, first off? And second of all, that's not going to fix this year's budget.
No.
So it's a moot point for down
Chairman
the road.
Winley.
So anyhow, going on, I pulled up here, I can just share with the commissioners, in our operating, in repairs, there was originally $1,900 budgeted and only 109 were spent. So repairs could be dropped down to $500 in operationals. Insurance, 1,020 was appropriated and only 680 was expended, 340 left over. So that might be in the right neighborhood of being okay. Telephone, we appropriated $1,500 and we've expended $3,340. So there's about 2,100 in there till the end of the year. So yes, go ahead.
Is my mic on?
Yes.
Okay, Marty Dernovich sent a chat that said that in the dues line that you were asking about, $45,234 of that is WCCA dues.
No, that's not accurate. No, I got it. All right, hang on. So with that, let's go back to our phone and that, I think that's probably in the right neighborhood. It might be $2,500, $1,000 too much. Then the next one under that would be advertising. Commissioner's advertising was set at 5,000 and only 75 was expended through the end of March. So you could reduce that probably considerably down to maybe 1,000 to advertising. Commissioners other, which is DirecTV. And I imagine that's for whatever.
That's for the Castle Rock.
It's for the Castle Rock room. That was set up at $3,000 and we expended approximately 1,000. There's 2,000 left over. So figure you could cut that $1,500 for that. Then after that, make sure I'm on my right pages. You've got commissioners others as well as what I was talking about. Then you got travel, which was set up for 15,000 for this year. And all but that amount that was mentioned is left. So you could reduce that considerably, Commissioner Shanefield. Then we got education for commissioners. There's $3,000 put into there, 0 spent, 3,000 left over, so you can pull it. Next thing is commissioner's office supplies. $2,000 was in there. We spent about $362. So there's 1,600 left. So you could bring that down easily to 750. And that still might be too much. And then we got dues. We've got, that'll change for this year because it dropped by $125. But anyhow, WCCA dues is 27,600 and some change. And CLG dues is at 35,000. And then, of course, we have we've got the Rocket Miner subscription, which is $100. So that's what you have in the commissioner's operationals. So
What pays for the printing of the minutes? Where's that coming from?
that comes out of the clerk's office, doesn't it?
Must, because not.
Yeah, it's not in here.
Okay.
Yeah, must come out of the clerk's office.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
the same process that was used to increase the commission has to be used to decrease. So it has to be put to a vote as well.
Okay. All righty. So commissioners, I don't know if there's anything in there you would like to drop down in operations. There's no capital. So operations is the only place we can help out. Again, WCCA dues is at, just like I said, about 26,600 approximately with some change. And CLG is 35,000. Thoughts?
Mr. Chairman, I'm on board with making the cuts that Lauren alluded to. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
it's really the only place we can cut, as we've talked about salaries and the difficulty there. And I don't think it's, everybody else is biting the bullet, and it seems like it's very doable compared to what we have spent in the past. So I'm on board with that.
Okay. Other commissioners? Okay, Mary? I'm Commissioner Tillman. Commissioner Lloyd?
I think I've spoken where I thought we could cut. So, and I'm good with where you cut in operationals. I thought we could get 2025 down, and it sounded like we got close to that. So,
Well, and the other aspect too is this is just this year. We've got another year. That's all I'm going to say. All right. Did you get all that, Bonnie? Probably not.
So cutting operating down to 80,000, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
And I'll look at my numbers here. It might be a little bit more than that if I can see it that I read
Okay.
off.
I will send you updated information on those charges and I can look at it too and see
Okay.
where we can bring that down.
Is it all right with
Get
the
there. Mm-hmm.
commissioners if I meet with Bonnie and go over those things we did? Protect the other things? All right, thank you. All right, moving on. Next up, Bonnie, you got a break, but does anybody need it?
Donnelly is
Huh?
next. Donnelly is next.
Well, when did you sneak in here?
An hour and a half ago.
Come on up. Price is right. Did you need support? Oh, there we go. Come on up. Introduce who you have with you, please.
I'm Donnelly Boback, Clerk of the District Court for Sweetwater County, and my Chief Deputy, Belinda Bridewell. And I made copies for you because I guess I have a question about our statutory.
Thanks, Donnelly.
Obligations for child support.
Thank you.
And I,
Ooh, this looks like good reading.
yeah. John, I guess I listened to the budget meeting and I guess there was a question about our obligations, or there's a duplicity of work with my office and child support services, and there is not. We are under a contract, which I also gave you a copy of. That is to eliminate duplicity of work between the two offices. And it shows what our obligations are to child support services and what their obligations are to us. And they supply all the equipment and everything that we use, printers, the computer, everything. And there was talk about, we used to get revenue from them. And we did, because they got money from the federal government, and that stopped. And when they were giving us that monthly allowance, they were only paying $50 for their cases, for the filing fee, when it was substantially more than that. And when we were in that meeting, they wanted to stay there and, you know, keep paying the smaller filing fee without paying us any monies for the month. And I said, well, you're getting the best of both worlds, so we need to be compensated somehow. And they are now paying the full amount, monthly amount, to file a case. And we are, by the statute, you'll see that, and child support is not, I think people have the misconception that all we do is take child support payments and disperse them. There's so much more to that. We still have orders and motions and hearings, and it's not any different than processing a criminal file or another civil file. There are statutory obligations regarding notice to payers, and that's when child support is ordered. There's an order that goes to the company and unemployment that says they will pay this amount monthly in child support. We have to distribute that, and then we collect the money, we disperse the money. And the other is that, I'm all flustered, I'm sorry. I shouldn't be, but I am. We have to send out certified copies of the order. But, and I highlighted that, you know, this is for enforcement only. That's what Child Support Services does. And that was, you know, when they paid us the monthly thing, that was to help in the enforcement of it only. And then on this last page, it shows the statutory obligations, that the duties of the clerk of the district court. And then again, like I said, I have the agreement. And that agreement is on a biennium and is good until 22. It'll come back up.
Thank you. I believe that was our request for Donnelly to come in and talk to us about child support system and bring us up to speed as to how
Okay.
funding and that type of thing. That was our big question.
Okay.
So
And yeah, I
anything
hope
more
I
to add?
answered what you needed. And
I don't know. Commissioners, any questions? Yeah, Commissioner Shanefield.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to say thanks for giving us this information. There has been just some misinformation about it, that it could be duplication of
Mhm.
services. We're really trying to look at where the
Exactly.
duplication is so that we can cut any duplication to save everybody money and time and energy. So
And
I
to,
appreciate, and I like statutes and being able, because it makes it pretty clear. It's cut and dry. So
Right.
this is really, it's good. Thank you.
and to be honest, if there's any duplication, some pay the state disbursement unit, which is part of the enforcement. That's the only thing if you want to say if there's any duplicity. That, but it's not, it's a different case. It's, what have you. So they're still separate.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, commissioners? All right, thank you. Appreciate you coming down and
Okay, anytime.
educating us, and thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, you guys have a great day.
You too as well. Don't forget, oh, that's not yours. That's Bonnie's. Don't
Oh,
take it.
I was gonna say, don't forget Belinda.
Thank you.
Very much.
All right, thank you. Have a good afternoon. Have a great evening. Okay, next up, I believe, Miss Bonnie,
Board of Health is up next.
Board of Health. Thank you.
See
I
Kate
don't
here,
know. I'm
so
looking
she
up
might
on-
be on Zoom.
Is
I'm
Kim on
here.
there?
Yep, I'm
Where are
here.
you?
Probably on page 2. Keep scrolling.
All right, Kim. Good afternoon. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
All right, you were asked to visit with us, and I believe with regard to budget. And with that, I think the big question was, Kim, is, we were asking for some help in reducing budgets, and we saw that many of our departments jumped in as well, and we're kind of curious what's going on with Board of Health, if there's any more that can be done on your department, on your side.
I cut significant from like advertising budget, professional fees when we pay lawyers and the accountants. The total amount that I cut was $18,500. If I cut more, then it is into salaries, personnel, and then just operating expenses of just running the business. So there's not really a lot of anything else to cut without going into people and then not having, like paper or ink or those types of things to kind of function.
Okay. Commissioners, questions?
Yeah.
Commissioner Lloyd.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I guess, Kim, first of all, thanks for being with us and being patient as always and all your good work. I guess my only concern is we've had the other component agencies go to 20% also. And for the library, I know that's been, I revert back to them, but I work with the library. Our cuts made them, once we went from 10 to 20%, made them also go into personnel and service provision. So I guess are we going to be consistent across that board? I know we started talking about wanting to be surgical, but then when we went to 20% across the board, it seemed like we went to being more consistent. So I guess where does the rest of the commission lie with that thought?
Well, what's your thoughts? We'll start with you.
I'll start with, I think if we're asking every other entity to do it and it's going to cut into employees, as much as I don't want to do it, I think we need to look at that same concept because it's affecting all the other component agencies also. I think we open the Pandora's door by doing it to not having one do it, but having everyone else do it.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Shankville.
Kim, I was just looking at your previous years and how much you'd used and everything. And I'm looking back to your 18-19 actuals, and it looks like you only utilized 633,782, which if we could get back to those numbers, that's 37,672. And that, I mean, it's not.
And there can be more used from like the cash carryover, like so that if I get cut, then I pull from reserves. I think right now I have about 113 days of cash on hand. So there could be some used there. And I had this conversation with Commissioner Smith, whereas if we do cut that, then next year, like that conversation occurred, previously in this meeting too, is if we cut and then don't go back, then there's then more people that are going to be affected by that as well. So I think that 633 was actually a missed payment on our part where we actually just failed to submit a voucher to be reimbursed that month. So I think that's where that came from, and not necessarily that it was a cut in what was for us. We just missed submitting an invoice, which we still obviously could function without that payment.
Thank you, Kim. Other commissioners?
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Commissioner Smith.
Hey, Kim, could you explain a little bit, as you did to me, about, you had, COVID money come in, but that money's expended and your COVID expenses won't be going away, I think is, or to some degree. Can you explain that a little bit to my fellow commissioners as well?
Yeah, we did get reimbursed CARES funding that was tied to basically contact tracing for the staff before we got extra help with contact tracing. And so the expenditure came from just regular staff doing theirs on a loaded amount. So it's not like directly tied to a expenditure where a lot of the other things with COVID are, as far as if a outside entity invoices me for testing, whatever it costs them, then that's basically what I reimburse them for. So we did receive funding for COVID, but a lot of what it did just covered what we spent, except for last fiscal year, we did get a little bit increase there that will probably sit in our reserves. And then what was the other part of your question, Commissioner Smith?
I was just saying that some of those expenses aren't going away, even though the money is. You're not going to be reimbursed.
Yes
for
and
ongoing
no.
expenses.
Right. Yes and no. I mean, as far as like our contact tracing and stuff like that is back at the state. So that's not an expenditure that will continue for our organization, but we still will if like Castle Rock sends us an invoice to reimburse them for testing. That contract that will help that goes through December of this year. And then that funding will go away. Funding with the vaccine, that has decreased. We're not out at the events complex anymore, so we're not paying those expenses. We don't have outside nurses helping us anymore with those. That contract also ends in December of this year as well.
Thank you, Kim. Other questions, commissioners? Commissioner Tolman?
Yes, how many dollars do you have in reserves? I know you said days.
I'm going to pull up my request.
I have it pulled up right here, Kim.
Okay.
It's 1,078,095.
That's not like total reserves, though.
That's cash on hand. And what I have showing is 116 days.
So your reserves are different, your cash on hand, Kim?
I don't see, like, if it's pulled up on something up there. I see cash on bank statements as of 3/31. Is that what you're looking at, Commissioner? Is the 1,078,095?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, that was cash on bank statement at 3/31, cash on hand. But there was obviously money that would be spent outstanding on that.
So we need to help you so you can report your cash on hand probably in such a fashion that it doesn't reflect that. Is that correct?
No, it just, if you look through the rest of it where you add everything outstanding, anticipated revenues and expenditures, then at the very end, then it's the, are you looking at E? Anticipated cash balances of 7-1.
Hang on, here's Bonnie.
I can bring it up.
While we're pulling it up, Kim, you received funding from the state as well as the county?
Yes.
Anybody else besides the two entities?
Yeah, so and then we get grant funding. So we have grant funding for the emergency preparedness grant. We have grant funding for the maternal child health programs through state general funds and TANF funds. The state general funds have been cut, and then I anticipate them cutting that again. We have other just miscellaneous income like immunizations, injection fees, and those kinds of things. But the large chunk does come from county, state, and then the grant funding.
Thank you. I think that was on your request form anyhow. Bonnie, what did you find out?
It's up on the screen, so if you want to switch, oh, you can't switch that over?
Just
Okay.
What number did you have?
So I think she's talking about the anticipated cash balance on 7/1 is $1,007,652.
That sound right, Kim?
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing. Yeah.
And that's what's used to calculate the day's cash on hand.
Okay, what are you, over the last 3 years, what have you used your reserves on?
Probably not other more than just salary benefits. So we draw down everything from the state. So if we have like maternal child health program, we usually run out of that funding before the fiscal year is over. And so then once that goes away, then we will dip into what the state has used it for. Then once that goes away, then we use county for that. So it's usually their salary benefits or expenditures for office expense and those types of items.
Historically, over the last 3 years, how much of your reserve have you used on the average?
I think reserve has actually increased over the last 3 years.
Thank you, Kim. Other questions, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Commissioner Lloyd.
Yeah, Kim, I guess when you discussed how this would affect, personnel and those kind of things within your office, could you give me an idea of how many positions that would cost and and how that would affect operations and your ability to meet any statutes or requirements?
I think this year it would be okay because of the reserves that would be in there. Then going forward, that would probably look like a full-time secretary position, at least. There's not really anywhere else I can do anything in environmental health. That's just 2 people, and historically that's been like 4 to 5 people in that realm. If you look at state planning for how many nurses our population should have, it could be up to 13, and we function with 7 full-time nurses. We have to have the emergency preparedness program, and that's covered through a federal fund anyway. So it would be probably secretarial positions.
Okay, thank you. But basically, if your impacts could be covered this year by your reserves, right?
Yes.
Okay, when I look at, and we get beat up on using percentages, but that's the way it is, I guess, for now. But when you take 20% of your budget, I think that's approximately 140,000, isn't it? From last year, your request?
Yeah.
Is that right or wrong, Bonnie?
It's a little bit less than 140.
Yeah, I got 139.5.
Is that how much you got?
I could be wrong, but let's say it's less than 140.
Yes.
All right, so you've already provided 2.7%, so you're looking at another 122,000 with the cash reserve of anticipating not using any of it, of $1,078,000. I'm inclined to go along with Commissioner Lloyd because everybody, we've got a few that have not, but I'm inclined to hold the line until otherwise can be proven at that 20% and that type of thing. We're taking money out of reserve to keep employees, Kim, in the county, and that type of thing. So I'm kind of asking you guys to be part of the solution as well. So I'm inclined to agree with Commissioner Lloyd that holding for you guys at 20%, but that's only 2 of us. We've got to figure out if there's a third one here for consensus. So with that, any other commissioner? Commissioner Shanefield agrees. Commissioner Smith agrees. Commissioner Toman? Okay, Kim, we would really want to ask you to help us out. So we'd ask that you go to 20% of that request from this last year, okay?
Okay.
Thank you very much. Appreciate what you did and truly appreciate also what you guys have done. Thank you. Any other
Thank-
comments, commissioners? Yeah, Commissioner Shanefield.
I don't have anything for Kim, but we didn't have that conversation with Donnelly when she was up here. Whether we were gonna leave it at where it was. Cause I think she was only at 12.29% down.
Who's your budget liaison?
Who's this?
Huh?
Donna Lee? Yeah, and I didn't think we were holding, that's me. I was her budget liaison. I didn't think we were holding our county offices to the same 20% because there's a lot of departments that didn't hit 20%. I thought that was just for outside agencies and components.
Correct.
I just wanted to have that conversation. I didn't know if we needed to come back to
No,
that
I don't,
later.
I don't think so at this
Okay.
point in time, because we do by statute have to perform those duties, so.
Right.
We need to take a look at other things. If we can't get there, then we may have to go back, okay?
Sounds good.
All right, thank you, Kim. Have a
Thank
good
you.
evening. Okay, you got all that, Bonnie?
Yes.
Thank you.
And Big Brothers Big Sisters is next.
Okay, up Big Brothers, Big Sisters, and that's who's on the screen for Big Brothers, Big Sisters.
I'm here. I apologize. Laura Labs wasn't able to make it today. I also have Jen Ortega with me, as well as our finance person who can help us answer any budget questions. So thanks for having us here today. I appreciate your time, and the very difficult nature of your work today does not escape us. We know you're in a tough place just like the rest of us. So appreciate your consideration. I believe you received our updated budget with the 20% cut. We do want to just let it be known that while we have a relatively small caseload right now, that unfortunately does not reflect the need in the county. And we anticipate the need will continue to grow as the effects of the isolation and the social disruption and instability and things like that of the past year kind of hit home for our young people. So we know that youth development folks are sounding the alarm in terms of being really concerned about what is coming up for our young people. And we think that we're in a good position to try to catch and remedy some of those lingering issues that the past year has brought us. So we're hopeful that we're able to continue serving the community and make up for some of the losses that have been felt over the past year. So we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have about our programming and our budget.
Before we get into that, I didn't hear your name, and I don't believe the people in the audience here heard your name. So could you reintroduce yourself, please?
I apologize. My name is Hannah Esslinger.
Thank you, Tana. Appreciate that. Commissioners, any questions? I believe Big Brothers, Big Sisters has.
Yes, Chairman.
Go ahead, Commissioner Stolman.
I was the liaison for that program, and I'm sorry to say this, but that was the hardest, most difficult one I've had to work with. I just don't feel it's good use of the county money to serve seven youth. I know it's a valuable program, but I just think we have other programs. I'd rather see it diverted to the 4-H program, where they have a really active program helping a whole lot more kids than this program. I just can't recommend, even at 20%. I just don't feel this is justified, and I hate to have to do this, to say this even.
Okay, so if I don't want to interpret what you're saying wrong, but are you possibly recommending no funding for Big Brothers and Big Sisters?
I am recommending no funding just because of the number of youth that are served. If you can get assistance and get your numbers up, maybe come back another time. But of all of the needs that we have out there, I just wouldn't feel justified in going forward with $12,000 or even a 20% reduction.
Okay. All right, so your feeling is reduce funding entirely. Commissioner Shanefield?
We do have 6 more youth being ready to get matched, and 2 more of them will be matched here in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you.
So how many total does that give you, though?
So with the total, with the 7 and the 6, there'll be 13 youth being served. We are waiting for more adult volunteers. Unfortunately, some of them had moved away before being matched after going through the process because of COVID and finding new jobs and moving away from town.
It's just still a tough one. I just say I would recommend working with industry to help have them. I know they volunteer, the big brothers and sisters, giving them time off work, I believe. But I just don't feel the program is warranted right now for this kind of funding.
Thank you. All right, so we have to decide, commissioners, if we want to cut that entire funding as Commissioner Tolman is requesting or thinking.
I think it's a valuable program. I'm not saying
No.
against it. It's just, right now is what I
Let's,
said.
yeah, and let's clear that up right away. There's not a one of us that
Yeah.
feels any program's invaluable. We're in a position, we've got to make a business decision, period. And I want you to reflect on it as that way, Commissioner Tolman,
Yes,
as well
I
as the other
do. I
commissioners.
definitely do.
So thank you for that. So we've got to decide where we want to, as a consensus, cut the entire program or just 20%. Commissioner Tolman said the program. Support, not the program, but supporting funding from the county for the program. So, Commissioner Shanefield.
Can I ask, do you guys, where else do you have funding at?
It depends year to year. We are waiting on some federal funding sources for answers to see if they are going to come through for us. Our year-to-year budget varies depending on what's out there as well as the community need.
Thank you. Commissioner Smith.
Can I ask what percentage of your budget the county contribution is, and how that would affect your overall budget?
Let me defer to my finance person here. Just 1 second. We're pulling the sheet up here.
Sure.
Could you
We have time. We have nothing but time.
Well, if you could kind of explain your framework. I understand your accounting is done through Laramie, and then we have 2 part-time people in Rock Springs. Is that correct?
Yes, our headquarters are all of our administration is in Laramie, and then we have 2 local, a case manager and an outreach person that are on the ground in Sweetwater County.
So they actually combine their administrative services with
Right.
Laramie.
Yeah.
They used to be under the YWCA.
Yeah,
So
I know.
20% cut would leave them with 9,600.
We currently are asking for 8,400. We've already taken 20% out.
Okay.
And if you take that out, or if we take it at 8,400, that's 14% of our budget for next year.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Smith?
I appreciate where Commissioner Tolman's going with this, but are we going to start doing surgical cuts deeper than, we were doing surgical cuts, and then we decided, some of us decided that 20% was the number. And all of a sudden we're imposing that across the board. And so when they do 20%, for us to ask more, I don't think that's fair. To me, I'm already not terribly happy that we've gone to the 20% across the board, where we started out this whole budget process with, let's do this surgically. Some can do more than others. Some provide more than others. Some have taken more cuts in the past. And now all of a sudden it's a 20% across the board, which I don't agree with. But, here's an entity saying, yeah, we'll do our 20%. And we're talking about, well, let's do 100% instead. So we're going to dig deeper surgically instead of, if we want to do surgical, then let's go back to some other things and talk about them. And perhaps they should have less cuts. So if we're doing 20% and they've given us 20, I don't think we should ask for any more.
Should we leave it at 20? Commissioner Shanefield.
Mr. Chairman, I agree. And even with the ones that I worked with that cut their budgets down 20%, I didn't even have them come today, because they did what we asked and we allowed that across the board. So yeah, I would like to leave them at their request of 8,400.
Commissioner Lloyd?
I think 2 thoughts. I think as we make these decisions today, we need to be clear that we walk away and we may say, hey, we think we can keep these guys at $8,400 or whatever entity we're looking at. with the caveat that we may have to go a little bit deeper when we get to the end and see where we're at. Because I think the part of the problem is, I think if we just get to 20% for every entity that we'll be seeing, we're still not going to be where we truly need to be in our numbers, unless we, Bonnie's got some concepts there within some of the overages and things like that. But, at this point, I'm willing to say to go to $8,400 for them, because they're at 20%, with the concept that next year we're probably going to be looking at like another 20 to 30, if not more, from this agency. But with the concept that we may have to come back and relook at this, and we may have to relook at everything, because once we cut everyone down 20%, I'm not convinced we're going to be where we need to be with our deficit. And this, I got to be honest, this is horrible. Like, I did not sign up to be a commissioner to cut $11 million from a budget. Like, when I was at a meeting the other night and I saw the cuts and how it impacted people, it was horrible. And knowing we're doing this to a lot of organizations, it stinks. There's no other way around it. But at the end of the day, we have to come up with an $11 million deficit and eventually balance a budget. That's horrible. That's a difficult thing. And good organizations, good people are going to have to take significant cuts because of this. And it's a horrible thing, but it's the reality of where we're at. So I would be okay with 8,400 now, with the concept that we may have to revisit all of these numbers once we get through.
Thank you, Commissioner Lloyd. You're exactly right. So we've got 3 commissioners at 20%, so we'll leave it there. They'll be funded at 8,400. The other thing I've been thinking about, why did we go 20%? And I think when the plan was brought to us that if we use this much reserve and we cut 20% this year out of our budget, then next year this much reserves and another percentage, whatever it was, I think that might have shifted us in the direction of using percentages to move through versus being more strategical. So as I think through it, that's my thinking. The other thing too is, commissioners, we're in this position because something occurred we had no control over. And that was our economy basically went to pot in this county March of 2020. And assessment dropped, prices dropped of all the extractions, production slowed down of other good extractables. And now we're left being the devil of the entire situation. But it's something that was out of our control, but we've been dealt a hand and we need to work through it. We will be dealt a hand again next year. I'm just hoping Bonnie's right. That's not as bad as we think it could be, but we're going to work on it and try and be a little more projectable with our budgets after July 1 when we get going. So that will fund at 8,400, please, Bonnie, for boys and girls, or big brothers and big sisters. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it.
And thanks for being patient. We know we're running late. Thank you.
No problem.
Mr. Chairman?
Thank
Yes,
you.
Commissioner Lloyd.
Just a point of clarification, and that would be, as we tell these organizations, hey, we're at 8,400, are these set in stone, or do we have the ability to go back and manipulate if we need to?
We have the ability to do anything we wish to.
Okay.
We are working that right now through the one phase. We can bring anybody back again that we feel we need to. I don't like that. Commissioner Smith doesn't like it.
Neither do I.
But if we don't do that, then we have to decide what the other option is going to be.
Right.
But you asked me, is it possible? My answer is yes, we
Okay.
can.
Thank
Doesn't mean that that's the right option. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you
right.
for your time today. I appreciate the difficulty of what you're trying to do. So
Thank you.
thank
Have
you
a
so
good
much.
evening. You
You
too.
too.
Stay safe, ladies.
Thank
Okay,
you.
up next, family planning. Whom do we? Ms. Ortega. Good afternoon.
Hey, my name's Kathleen Shipley. I'm with Western Wyoming Family
I saw-
Planning.
I'm sorry, Kathleen. I saw Ms. Ortega up on the screen. My
Oh, I'm sorry.
apologies. Welcome.
Hi.
We brought you in because you have a request of $16,000, and back in 2019, you had, I believe, 16.5, and then next year, nothing this last year. And now you're back with us as a new account, basically from last year, requesting
Correct.
$16,000, which is nearly the same as your 2019, 2020 numbers.
And we would be happy to obviously go along with the 20% reduction. no questions asked.
Okay, hang on a minute. Okay, very good.
Kind of.
Commissioners? Yeah, Commissioner Shankville.
Kathleen, in looking at your days of cash on hand, it looks like you have 312 days of cash on hand, which is a significant amount in regards to kind of what we've been looking at for cash on hand.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just curious as if you've had carryover for the past few years, if you've been able to put more, has it grown over the past few years?
No, the grant that we get from the Title 10 is about 50% of our payroll. So we just have to count on patient fees and donations from the public to make up the difference. We don't really have a grant that we've carried over or made a buildup of our reserves from.
So you've had about 312 days of cash on hand for a significant period of time?
About a year and a half.
Okay. So you didn't request any funding from us last year. Is there a reason for that?
Yes, there was a change in directorships here, and I had always filled out the vouchers monthly and submitted them to Glenda, and then submitted our newspaper salaries and stuff. And so I thought she was the gal who sent out the information. But I came to find out after the fact that that was not the case. And so there was a mix up on my side with our email address, getting the correct information from our change of directorship. And so we were out of the budget request for 2020 to 21.
All right. How did you cover that 16,000?
Like I said, we have 2 employees. One is a nurse practitioner who is the money generator, and then myself who does all the admin portion. And we've cut both of our hours back. So we've just been trying to, skim by as best we can.
Thank you, Kathleen. Other questions?
Thank you.
Commissioners? Oh, I'm sorry, Lauren. Go ahead. Lauren still has the floor.
Sorry, I feel like I'm grilling you, but I have lots of questions. So if you've cut hours back, but you're only asking for 500 less than the year, the last time you received funding from us, where else have you made those cuts?
Sorry, you're thinking, where have we made cuts?
Yes, because you're asking for only $500 less if you've cut hours from both of those positions.
We actually, I guess, deleted one whole employee. We did not replace a whole person.
Okay.
We just made it up with the 2 people that we kept.
Thank you. Questions? Other questions, commissioners?
Yeah, Ms. Shipley.
Commissioner.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Lloyd.
Ms. Shipley, one thing I was looking at is in your revenue, you have an estimated budget of revenue of $203,830. Your expenditures out are actually $186,700, which is actually a positive $17,130, which is more than what your request to us is. So I question, do you even need our $16,000 to continue? Because based upon your revenues and your expenditures, it shows that you wouldn't need that.
To be 100% honest, we probably could get by without. If it would, leave that money's wide open for somebody else, I would be happy to, have it reconsidered.
And I was only basing that comment, Ms. Shipley, on the fact that when you look at the revenues versus the expenditures, that would show there. And I guess the other thing too is, since there wasn't a funding request last year, this really isn't, if we take 5 or 20%, it really isn't a decrease. It's still an increase from a request from last year. So yeah, thank you for answering my questions.
Of course.
Thank you, Commissioner Lloyd. Any other questions, commissioners? thank you for your honesty, Kathleen. And, you know, if you made the offer of being without it, I'm going to jump all over it and ask you to seriously consider, because there will be programs that will be drastically affected. And 17,000, well, we just heard one. You just heard one from the Big Brothers and Big Sisters and that type thing. You heard from the Board of Health. And anyway, but you know, we would certainly appreciate it if you withdrew your request, but I'm going to let you have some night of rest over that.
Okay.
And please, and if you decide what you're going to do, please let Bonnie know. But I think at this point in time, since your last figure that you submitted was 16,020, if we stay with our 20%, we'll at least reduce it by that much. But again, too, let Bonnie know if you can forfeit your request entirely, please.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, anybody in agreement with that or disagreement? Mr. Lloyd?
No, I think that's a fair plan.
So we're reducing 20% from the 16.5 previous? Is that what you said? Or from the
Do it
16?
from the 16.
From the 16?
If they don't.
Yeah, if they choose not to withdraw. Thank you.
Consider.
Okay, moving forward, youth home. And Bonnie, who do we have on for youth home? Do you know?
David Thorne.
David. Good afternoon, David.
Hello, all. Chairman and county commissioners.
David, we noticed that in your request, you chose not to reduce any part of your request as was sent out and requested and that type of thing. We have you before us as to what's your reasoning?
Yeah, and initially, and I can discuss further that, you know, the rethinking of all that and what all of you have proposed and offered as well. But when we originally submitted it, a lot of what we're looking at is funding for child protection placements when we get kids that are taken into custody by police or county attorney and placed in custody of DFS for care, and they don't have foster homes that can serve certain kids, especially a lot of the teenagers or certain types of kids that have they've been sexually abused and they also are now a sex offender themselves. Most foster homes aren't going to be able to take those kids and deal with them, that type of thing. They turn to us, and the biggest thing is you know, I believe we're seeing oftentimes, just as the ambulance service and the fire department, those kinds of things that on an emergency basis, if someone in the county needs care for children, they turn to us. And if we don't have the staff there, the services available, the facility available, not sure what's going to happen to those kids, that type of thing. Second, on that, you know, I am not adverse to, you know, reducing, taking the reduction that everyone else is taking and pitching in. I don't want to come across as not being a team player, because I do understand what everybody's going through sacrifice wise, and the commitment the county commission specifically has helped with the youth home over the years. Even though we reduced the number of reductions since I've been here, still supporting the youth home and helping out any way possible. That's where I offer, I guess. I have no problem in offering up the request, and I believe our request would be adjusted by $30,934 down to a request of $123,736.
Did you get that, Bonnie?
So that's a 20%?
Yes.
What was the new amount?
The amount I have is $123,736.
That's what I had too.
Yep, that comes up to 20.
Okay. Commissioners, your thoughts? You okay with that?
Yes.
Commissioner Smith?
Dave, can you tell us what that means for you in your, just in day-to-day operations. What does that mean? I met with you earlier this year
Right.
and had discussions and about budget. So could you just explain to us what that will mean for your operation?
Yes. I think I actually got video going now at times, so you could actually see my face instead of just a phone number or whatever. Yeah, we had talked about that, and it's really a juggling process at this point. We've had reduction in placements, revenue, those kinds of things from 2020, just like everyone else. But it's also, we provide services that we get some funding through the state legislature for crisis placements, but it's only at about a 67% coverage. And that's where we turn to other revenue sources, such as the county commission, to help balance that other 30%, that type of thing. And what it can mean is that we have to somehow reduce the number of placements we can take in at any given time, partially because we may not be able to fund as many staff. That's kind of what we have been doing a couple times over the last year, where we've actually condensed our two houses. We have one in Green River, one in Rock Springs, and we've actually condensed them to try to balance a budget, try to compensate for not enough staff, that type of thing, and some reduction in placements, so we could do that at the time. And that has helped some. But what it could mean is we have to turn people away, and we can't take on some of the crisis placements, which are short-term placements, or some of the group home placements, which are long-term placements. But yet, and even where the group home placements are court-ordered placements, where we basically, we have some input into it with the judge, but ultimately, if the judge orders them to us, we don't have a lot of say so in turning them down. And I don't know if that's going to become a bone of contention or not with the courts, but that may be what we have to do as well, is say, we only have this many court-ordered kids we can take. And then, like I also talked with you, Jeff, that the biggest one that concerns us is in the middle of the night when they take child protection custody and they need a placement for a kid, or a lot of times we've gotten those ones in the night have been actually brothers, sisters, sibling groups, can be anywhere from 2 to 4 kids that we may need to take in and not be able to do that.
Thank you, Dave.
I hope that answered your question.
It does. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Dave. Other questions, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Shanefield.
Dave, I see that you have 175 days of cash on hand, which is about 500,000. Has that been stable over the past few years? Have you had to use any of it?
No, actually, we have had to use, I was calculating that earlier too. Originally, 2 years ago, we had in reserves, we had built up to be about 750,000 in reserves. And part of that was the reason why we were trying to do that is our Green River house really should have been replaced probably 10, 15 years ago. And it's old. It's not means that it's not up to code and regulations of serving the children we serve, but it's an old house and it's constantly nickel and diming us type of thing with repairs and those kinds of things. And we try to, the county owns the building, but we try to pull our weight and have taken on the expenses of replacing, like the chairman mentioned earlier to somebody about the, replacing the furnace, the hot water tank that goes out, those kinds of things. We've tried to burden that rather than having the county do it because they own the building. We've tried to help out with that. Anyway, back to that, in the last year and a half, we have drawn down 275,000 approximately from our reserves down to what you see now. And biggest part of that had to do with being functioning through the pandemic, those kinds of things, reduced revenue and lack of placements, those kinds of things. And let's see, I calculated 37% of our reserves being used over the last 2 years, down to that figure now that's approximately 500,000.
Anything else, Commissioner? Thank you. Anything else, Commissioners?
One last question for me, Mr.
Mr. Lloyd.
Chairman, if possible. Yeah. Hey, David, thank you for everything, and thank you for being willing to come down that 20%. The only question I have is I'm taking a look at your expenditure and budget projections for next year. You have your total budget and total expenditures of $747,936. Sorry, yeah, your expenditures are that, but your actually anticipated revenue is actually $973,470, which actually shows a positive 225,534 that includes our portion. I guess, why do you even need our 140 if it seems like it's already covered?
And that's not been accurate since then. We've
Okay.
had with the state, we're entering into what they call a group home block grant payment system. Instead, before it was, if we had 15 court ordered placements, we got the going daily rate per diem per month for that child, depending on the number of days they were with us. And we were able over the years that's where we were able to build some reserves, as we actually, in a sense, made some money, that type of thing. But since that time we've entered, and it's going into effect, well, as of today, a block payment grant system like the crisis grant is with us with the state legislature. So we're only going to get a certain amount, which is going to run about 20 to 24,000 less a month than what we had been getting. And that takes that up to about a drop in about $175,000 to $210,000 for this coming year.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And Roy, that didn't carry over correctly on,
Okay.
he didn't fill out that last column of the form. It didn't,
Okay.
so you actually have to take the 895
Okay.
plus the 154. So you're looking at more like 1,050,000 in expenditures.
Okay.
So yeah, that last column didn't get filled out.
Yeah.
Very good. Good catch, Bonnie. Thank you. Any other questions, Commissioners? Dave, thank you for joining us this afternoon. Appreciate you willing to step up, and you have a good evening and be safe.
Thank you all. I appreciate your guys' time and consideration to it, because I know that's kind of a thankless job at times, and we do appreciate your support.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on. We got YWCA, and who's on for Y? Oh, here we go. Step up to the plate. Nobody will throw you a fastball, but I won't guarantee you won't get a curve.
I might be able to catch it.
I want you to hit it out of the park.
I'll do my very best.
All right, thank you. Please introduce yourself.
So I'm Jen Viggers. I'm the Child Care Director at the YWCA. You are seeing me today because you were going to see Kayla, but she's got a sick kiddo. So you get me instead. So I have my notes, so I'll do my best. I also brought Cheryl with us. She's our accountant. She's in the back. And then one of our board members is also in the back. Her name is Debbie, and she is here to also give you guys a little bit of information. So
Could I just ask you a question? I
Yes.
know Melinda has gone on vacation or something,
yes.
but she did tell me that it would be resubmitted with a 20% reduction. But if you want to go ahead and do your presentation.
Yes. So our understanding was we submitted at 15%. We were
Right.
trying to keep that. So we wanted to discuss with you guys the different options and what that looked like, a 15% versus a 20%. So that's why we actually requested to come speak to you guys. So last year, with some cuts, we actually eliminated 3 positions at the YWCA, 2 advocates and 1 admin. We've also cut down our CFC office hours. So right now they are not open to the public on Fridays, other than crisis line. And then we've
because we've made those cuts, we've had to change some things. So Melinda, as the executive director, is not only doing her duties, she's also doing all of the HR things. The accounting department is now just a one person, whereas before we had a 2-person department. And our financial empowerment director now has been trained in all areas of YWCA, so she can kind of fill in where needed. So with a 15% cut, that cuts out all of our IT assistants. So we will now be running our entire IT system. The company that currently does it isn't too sure that we can handle it, but we have to do what we have to do. So we're going to try to figure that out. With a 20%, it means a decrease to our financial empowerment director's hours. So right now, she's kind of taking on lots of different positions at the Y. Like I said, she's been trained in all areas so she can fill in where needed. But she also provides our financial courses to the community, which is a free service to everybody. So if her hours were to be reduced, that would mean less flexibility for those clients. So right now, she tries to work with those clients on time frame, what works for them. But now we'd have to have a little bit more of a stricter, more rigid schedule for that. And so that is kind of the difference between the 15% cuts out all IT assistants, which we're prepared to do. Bumping it up to that additional 5% to 20 means reducing more staff hours on top of what we've done last year. So Debbie had a few words for you guys, so I'm going to tuck to the side and let her.
Introduce Miss Orr, and Miss Orr can come up.
This is Debbie Orr. She's a long-term board member.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Miss Orr.
Hey, Debbie.
Hi.
Hi.
So I've been part of the YWCA's Board of Directors since 2014. During that time, I've served as the treasurer and the board president. As a businesswoman, I understand the economy in Sweetwater County and how the loss of revenue is affecting the community. But I do believe that the mission of the YWCA is, and the work they do is very important to our community, to our families. I believe it's important to help our families to be safe, self-sufficient, and focused on they and their children's futures. This past year, the board was very involved in funding discussions because we anticipated what's happening right now with the loss of income for everybody. I was part of the budget review committee that was taking a really detailed look at our entire budget and the proposed cuts by each program director. And we looked at what we could cut and what would affect our ability to continue providing all the services we do. We believe that we've cut out all the flexibility out of our budget and did everything we could to maintain the staff that are essential to make our services possible. The board is also focusing on using this coming year to build up additional revenue options. We're looking at developing another fundraiser, developing an online donor campaign, and also building up our endowment. Our hope is that allowing us to remain at the funding amount of 15% that we presented, it would let us build up our resources to replace lost revenue and help us to find ways to grow in the future. So I appreciate your taking the time to listen to us, and we appreciate that you have provided such important funding for many, many years.
Thank you, Ms. Orr. Commissioners, any questions for either of our guests? Commissioners, I believe there's no questioning. It's a matter of do you accept 15% or request to go to 20 based on the information.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Shanefield.
I have concern just about knowing that they're dealing with financials. They're talking about their IT and the cybersecurity world is a very real threat right now. So I would suggest, and I don't know if this is even possible because I know we're getting down to the nitty gritty, but maybe we hold and then see kind of at the end where we're at. If we need to cut it down to 20, we can. If not, then we can look at that. I also know that financial program right now is probably helping a lot of people. Have you seen an increase in services with that?
Yes.
A considerable amount, I would assume.
right now we have a considerable amount of increase, but we've also been getting our parents of our childcare really involved and a lot of our staff. Corey is the director of that program. She actually just did a financial wellness challenge with all of our staff. So it's definitely been going up of people realizing they need to look at things a little bit closer, just like we all are with everything. So
Do you have numbers on that?
I don't on me,
Okay.
but it's something we could get to you guys
That would
fairly
be-
easily.
I would like to know how many people are being affected by that, how many families?
Definitely.
Hold on, here we go. Got some information. Please
Maybe
introduce
Cheryl
yourself.
does. Sorry.
I'm
Please.
Cheryl Pettick. I'm
Welcome,
the
Cheryl.
accountant. I do know that approximately 40% of your parents are on assistance,
Right now, we're at about 48% of our parents are on tuition assistance.
and they take those classes.
Yes, they're required to take those classes.
Thank you.
So just the childcare alone it's a huge increase.
Thank you.
What was that at before? It was in the 20s, right?
Yeah, it's significantly increased. Luckily, we have had some help with the Department of Family Services with how they've changed their funding on contracts with tuition assistance, but it definitely has gone up. I believe a few years ago when I looked at it and came to you guys, we were at like 35 to 40%, but it's definitely gone up to that closer to 48%. And it increases in the summertime when you have parents that now need full-time childcare because it's summer break and they need us in the summer. So that increases it as well.
Thank you. Okay, commissioners, we have a commissioner recommending we hold them at the 15% until we get to the end. If we need more, we'll take more. And it's approximately, my figures aren't accurate, but it's about $14,000.
Yes. Well, thank you guys for all of your time and everything you do.
We're not done.
Sorry.
We only had one commissioner
I'm sorry.
speaking. No, you're fine. I just didn't want
I'm
you
new.
to, I didn't want you to miss all the rest of it. So hold on.
Okay.
Okay, you're fine. Commissioners, other thoughts? Roy?
I guess I got volunteered again, so we'll jump up. I got to be honest, when we started this process, I had two hopes. I thought, A, we could really surgically cut through everything, and B, I thought that we could really work with the concept of any significant cuts maybe happening over a 2-year period by softening the blow with the reserves. And we did soften the blow by using anywhere from $6 to $7 million in reserves, and right now a cash carryover of $3 million. So it's helped out a lot. But unfortunately, I got to be honest, every agency we work with does a good thing. And every agency we've had a cut to 20% has had to take significant cuts in personnel, in facilities and services driven. I can tell you, I know one of these had to lose 2 or more employees already, what they did. So I would prefer to go backwards from what Lauren said, is look at the 20% at this point. And then if we're able to fund back and look at all the entities that we've cut at 20 and make determinations of which ones we can bring back, because no matter how we do this, we're cutting good agencies and there's no way around it. I mean, when we came into today, we were still $1.63 million short. And as we start to even talk, $14,000, it's a tiny bit, but we have to have a lot of tiny bits to get to the big picture. And I will tell you, personally, I will be honest and say I struggle a little bit with some of the county funding toward the daycare and the financial empowerment, because I don't know if that's really county responsibility. But I will tell you, I think the domestic violence work you guys do is impeccable, and I don't think that can be moved at all, because I think it's the only resource in 4 counties, and I think that is a service that has to be provided at some level. And so I kind of want to stay consistent, because even though I didn't want to go across the board, we've kind of gone that way. So that's kind of where I lay.
Okay, so we have another thought is request 20% and revisit later if it's possible. So we have 2 thoughts out there. Next up.
Well, I have a third thought. It's not my thought, it's Lauren's. I think if the ones that have cash reserves, that maybe that's an area where we can make some of the cuts and be a little more strategic. I appreciate what you do and that you are the only ones for the domestic violence. So I would just say, look at this whole thing, and 20% across the board. I know it sounds great, but it's not fair. That's what I'm feeling. But what is fair? Equal is not always equitable. How about that?
It's exactly what we said in the school business.
And their cash on hand is only at 67 days, so it's significantly lower than the majority of our other entities. Just food for thought.
So, yeah. So what I'm hearing though, that it's just a matter of supporting revisiting again, whether it's could take it to 20 and revisit it or leave it at 15 and revisit it, knowing that that's an area we can pick up $14,000 and just notify you we did it.
Okay.
That's the way I read the options. Mr. Smith, any thoughts? No?
I'm showing 11,922. Is that?
Okay, so 12,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
No,
I just
no,
wanted to
make it-
sure I wrote down the right number.
I just did a real rough
Are we going
division.
to 20? Is that what you want me to do, or?
Well,
We're still discussing.
Okay.
We'll get back to you. I think that's what they're telling you.
Okay.
well, I haven't
Keep
said
praying here for a
anything.
while.
I haven't said
There's some
anything.
marinating going on up here.
It's okay. We have time.
I think there's going to be more that if we find ourselves in a position to revisit and possibly give some money back to. So I'm of the mind that I would much rather stand strong and everybody can walk away saying, hey, I think we were treated the same. But at the same token, they don't have to agree, but at the same idea, there's a possibility to revisit it. So I would definitely put YWCA one that we have to revisit to see if we can possibly give them money back. If it's all right with the commissioners, stay with the 20. So it's just a matter of either get it at the end or you don't get it.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
So I would, commissioners, your thoughts?
We already got 'em.
I know it, but we're sitting kind of at 2 and 2, so 2 and 2.
Last vote this time.
20% it is.
Okay, 20%.
Okay.
You're on the list, though.
Okay.
You're on the list. There'll be a couple others, I'm sure.
Well, we appreciate you guys and everything you're doing. This is not easy. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're scheduled for a break. Commissioners, do you need a break?
Yes.
How long?
10 minutes would be fantastic.
All right, you're going to get 10 minutes. We're going to get back here at 5:20. 5:20, please, people. is Cooperative Extension. Thank you. Come on up and introduce yourselves, please.
So I'm Bridger Fates with University of Wyoming Extension. I'm the Associate Director covering the west side of the state. And I have Marty Henry here with me, who is the County Coordinator for Sweetwater County.
Welcome. Thank you. As you know, we asked you to come in and visit with us. We have requested cuts in budgets, and it was obvious that you were called in because you only did about a 7.63% cut, and we need to basically have you explain to us why we shouldn't take it down to the 20.
Right. So, I mean, I know past is the past, right? So, and you referred to, you know, people have had to have cuts. I think it's to give you a little historical context, though. The Extension Sweetwater County relationship is somewhat unique in that, and I was looking around the room today and I realized I was the only one in the room the last time this happened, right? So I was the county coordinator. I was the county coordinator at the time, but we had averaged a budget with the county of about $221,500 from 2008 to 2010. And really, if you go back further, it was over that 200,000 mark for a long, long time. At those 2010 meetings, when we were talking about the FY 2011 budget, the county commissioners at that time decided to cut UW Extension completely from the budget. In fact, that was my very first meeting that I attended, the county commissioner meeting. So it was a real interesting meeting, but they cut us completely from the budget. There was definitely some significant sort of negative impacts to that. Some of you that are around here remember those. I'm not going to go through that, but those negative impacts brought the commissioners back to the table, at least with UW, because at one point they just said, we're cutting you, it's done, we're not going to talk. So they came back to the table and asked us, myself, Dwayne Williams, who was in my position now, the associate director at the time, and our director, to come up with a bare minimum budget that we could operate on to keep Extension in Sweetwater County. So that's what we did. We came back with, and that budget was 107,744. So less than half of our funding we had been getting. Now, I'm going to tell you that did come with consequences to Sweetwater County. You certainly haven't gotten the same amount of service that you used to because we simply couldn't meet that. But that was what the commissioners wanted, was that minimum amount to keep essentially 4-H as a program in Sweetwater County. So that's where we're at. So forward that a few years later, our proposed budget was only 7.5% cut, but that's actually $5,400 less than that minimum budget that we put together 10 years ago. So I know that you've talked about not strategic cuts straight across the board, and that things aren't fair for those. I get that, but y'all, I also want you to appreciate that we've kept a flat budget and kept our end of the bargain, essentially, for 10 years with Sweetwater County as the commissioner. So that's why we're at where we're at. I've also provided you with some information in terms of, you've mentioned it, we're all great programs. I get that too. We can all tell our story well, but we have a story to tell as well, right? So with 4-H, we definitely impact a lot of youth, 266 youth in the program, right? And those impacts really go throughout the community in terms of 4-H. We're a key partner in the fair. Really, it's difficult to have county fairs without youth shows. It's a real challenge. It becomes something else besides a fair. And you watch the the way the community supports the 4-H program through that livestock sale, it does bring the community together in a way that it's difficult for other organizations. I know that you guys are familiar with 4-H. What you might not be as familiar with is some of the work we do with horticulture. Certainly, last year we had about 500 hours of community service from our master gardeners go into Sweetwater County. That was from previous master gardeners. There's about 20 master gardeners every year that take the class, and they're required to donate 40 hours of service every year. So that's potentially another 800 hours of service that you get as part of that program. And then finally, with our Sensible Nutrition Program, we've already talked about some of the economic issues facing Sweetwater County and how that really has affected some of the other entities, but it affects our Sensible Nutrition Program as well. So Wendy Nilsson has been working with about 200 families a year, graduating about 150 graduates a year in her Sensible Nutrition Program, which teaches low-income families how to balance their budgets, their food budget essentially. And so they learn skills like cooking from raw materials rather than buying pricey packaged materials as a way to learn to balance their budget. So, it truly is a program that impacts, 200 families is a large impact in Sweetwater County to be able to help them meet their budget and not rely on some of the other services that Sweetwater County offers. So that's kind of where we're at and why we're here. I mean, I understand we're not blind. We've listened to others, but we feel like we do have a compelling reason as to why we're at that budget number we're at currently.
Thank you. Anything to add, Marty?
No, I helped create that document, so he just got to voice it.
You got to read it. Okay, well, it's a nice document. It's got some great information in it. Thank you. Matt, so commissioners.
Chairman,
Yes, Commissioner Tillman.
I was the budget liaison for the extension, and I appreciate, the cuts they've made and tried to keep the program afloat. I also want to point out that one of our duties as a commission is to help support that county fair. And without this program, the county fair is an events fair, not a county agriculture fair. So I would just ask for your support to support the budget as they've submitted it, because they've more than contributed their part in the last 10 years of saving us $100,000 a year for 10 years.
Other commissioners? Commissioner Shanefield.
So in 10 years ago, you went to the 107, is that right? So the percentage of cut from that is only 5%. And I know that, I worked at the YWCA and we were cutting 24% and then 18% the next year. And that was within the last 8 years. So were you guys immune from those cuts across the board once you reached that 107?
We were fairly flat. Well, we were essentially flat from that 107.
They cut 50% or more than 50 in 1 year.
Yeah. And the thing is, like I said, the conversation at the time was, what is the exact minimum amount we can fund to still be able to have extension in our county? That was the question. It wasn't give us a number that we can reduce you from. It was, what is the bare minimum? And that's the number we gave them.
Yeah. Okay. But you do realize that we're not in a normal cycle, normal year.
I understand that.
Very good. Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, I see these other agencies, and 10 years was a long time ago. We've made a lot of cuts across the board from then till now. And now we're again asking for the 20%. So I think that unfortunately, I was a 4-H kid. I support 4-H. I think that it's extremely important. It taught me so many life lessons, but I think my opinion is we're going to have to look at that 20%. And like I said, if we went back 10 years on everybody's budgets, we would see where everybody has cut. Again, at the YWCA, I cut 2 programs in total to fit that 24% and that 18%. And like I said, that was about 8 years ago. So I think that you would probably see a similar comparison over 10 years for everybody, unfortunately.
I actually went back and looked at the Sweetwater County budget over the 10 years and looked at our percentage of that budget. And we have stayed flat or declining as a percent of that budget, which means that we've kept up with the cuts that you've made.
Other comments, Commissioner Lloyd?
Yeah, I actually have a question for Attorney De Leon. I'll throw a curveball here. John, with them under a current contract, are we able to request the change, or would we need a change in contract to do that?
So, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Lloyd, there is an agreement, an annual compensation agreement, which is a yearly contract, which is due up June at the end of the month, June 30th. So there would have to be a new contract. That contract would have to be made anew. There is a collateral memorandum. That's a 5-year memorandum, which can be the commission can or any party can address at any time. It says that it shall be reviewed at least every 5 years. That is due to be up June of 2022. There is language in that memorandum which says that within the exercise of lawful authority and available funds. So I think that there is some discretion in there for the commission to determine what is best and appropriate. That being said, there's also, when you look at the annual compensation agreement, it's covering, there's 1.5 people that are involved in that. And so that's where the funds go to. Does that answer your question, Commissioner?
It does. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, commissioners?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner
One
Lloyd?
more question for our folks from the cooperative offices. If you were to make the to get your cuts to 20%, how would that affect the current ability to provide services, and what specifically would it affect?
Well, if we tried to do that without any changes in personnel, it essentially cuts our operating budget to nothing. In terms of our ability to support the 4-H program, it really takes those opportunities that the 4-H kids get that make it the program that it is, so that it creates kids that are less likely to seek other services in terms of at-risk behaviors and those sorts of things. We need a certain amount of operating funds to be able to do that. And essentially, without some sort of personnel change, it would cut all of that operating funds. If there's a personnel change, that would also cut at least one of the programs. So,
That is your question? Other questions, commissioners? I have one. You came before us, Marty, a while back, and we're looking at expanding the program. This probably, with 20% cut, what does that do to those plans?
It doesn't deter me, just mostly because I'm stubborn. I will never not want this program to grow.
I understand.
Will it get to grow as fast as I want it to? No. And those plans were prior to COVID, and they weren't really plans, they were hopes and requests. And they are reserved for another day, for another time when we're not in this situation, but they are still very strong for me.
Thank you. Well, commissioners, I think we're down to, if there's no more questions, do we accept the request? Do we, another option like we have provided others, move it down to 20 and then revisit it depending on where our budget's at? Or do we notify them that if we're not where we think we need to be, we'll cut it down to 20 and just notify them? Any other options you can think of? It's how we treat everybody else.
I think we stick with part of the course and move it down to 20 and then mark it as something to review if we can.
Can review it along with YWCA because we have them on our list as well. Roy?
I would be okay with that because one of the difficult parts we're doing here is saying, since we're not going surgical is, again, is 4-H more important than the senior center? Is 4-H more important than YWCA? Is Big Brother's big? It's hard because every one of these organizations have a significant impact on someone's life. And I think at this point, the best way to do it would be to slide it to even. And I think as a commission, we need to have a conversation about which outside entities we fund and what are the priority populations, and then really push to support those priority populations and move away from the others. So that's just my thought.
Thank you, Commissioner Lloyd. Other thoughts? I've got a recommendation down to 20 and look at it. And if there's anything available to help, we decide put 4-H in the mix. Any thoughts, disagreements?
Well, I disagree.
Thank you.
Seriously. There you go.
All right, so we have one vote, or basically a consensus of no, 2 of yes, I believe.
I don't, Mr. Chairman, I don't see how, I'm disagreeing with this whole process. We started as, let's do surgical cuts. And I spent hours and hours, as many of my commissioners did, visiting with people, visiting with entities to find out how it will affect them, trying to get the stories. What does it mean by doing cuts? What can you do? What can't you do? I think that the cash on hand is excellent. The day's cash on hand has been an excellent tool that Lauren's brought to our attention. And I agree with that greatly, so that we're able to, can you float? Can you take less this year? You have quite a bit of reserve.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, for Commissioner Toman, I mean, okay, so you adamantly want 4-H, but you're okay with a brother and a sister not being able to stay here and go to school here because they're removed from the home, and instead they have to go to Natrona County. So
I did not say that. Excuse me.
well, I'm just saying, we did the 20% there. Why would we not do 20% here? That's all I'm saying. I disagree with the 20% from the beginning, but we've gone down that road now. So that's not what we agreed upon when we first started this process. And so that's what makes me angry, is that we're not we did all this due diligence beforehand so that we could have intelligent conversations and allow programs to thrive if they need to, or survive even. And instead we're just saying 20% across the board. Why'd we even have everybody come in? We should have just said that at the very beginning and saved ourselves a lot of time. And that's my frustration. And I'm very frustrated.
We all are. Everybody is. So don't lose clear heads, please. That's all I ask. All right. So I think as I read through on the consensus of a 20% cut with putting 4-H extension on the list to revisit along with YWCA, is that correct? From a consensus, it's not unanimous. I'm not hearing. Okay. We will show a reduction, but we're going to put you on the list because we want to revisit it.
Okay.
All right?
Can I just say
Sure.
one other thing? Just as a clarification, we have 0 days cash on hand.
Yes, thank you.
We haven't been keeping any
I know.
cash from you in our budget.
Yeah, and I've got I highlighted the 0 on my sheet. Thank you. Okay. Miss Bonnie, I believe Red Desert Roundup.
Yes.
Over to you. Please join us, introduce yourself.
I'm Travis Garrison, president of the Red Desert Roundup Rodeo.
Okay, Travis, thank you. And thanks for being patient with us. You've been here a long time.
That's the first time I've had to do this.
We'll go easy on you. We won't go easy on your budget. We'll go easy on you. Okay, I believe, last year you didn't put in anything because of the COVID and you canceled the.
Yeah, we put
Red
in a
Desert.
request and then canceled the rodeo. So we canceled our request end of May.
Okay, and so, but your prior actuals was about 12,000 in the year 1920.
Yep.
So you're requesting now 8,400.
A reduction of 30% from the 12,000. Yes, sir.
Okay, I think that's what people wanted you to come in and talk with about and see where things were at. So, commissioners, just any question for Travis?
You're on schedule for the show this year, right?
Yes, ma'am. We changed it to a 2-day rodeo, Friday and Saturday, so we could make the budget small enough to come together and have a rodeo for everybody.
Go ahead, Commissioner Shanefield.
So in the years 1819, it looks like you asked for 8,100. And then that was up then the next year. What is the reason for that?
I believe we asked for 12 and then it was reduced to 81.
Okay, that makes sense. And then my other question for you is how are you doing on getting sponsorships from businesses? I know that a lot of people want to do stuff right now because
You know,
we've been stuck.
a lot of the longtime sponsors are still doing whatever they can. It may not be the same amount, but they all want it, so they're all trying to chip in. It's coming along. It's coming together, slowly but surely.
Okay, other questions? I just kind of think people wanted to visit with you and see where you're at, and I knew it wouldn't take long, so. Commissioners, okay with the 8,400? Lloyd? Commissioner
Yeah,
Lloyd?
I'm okay with the 8,400. And since we're playing, I would, and I think this is, I'll be honest, Travis, I think the Red Desert Roundup's a great event. And I think it brings a lot to the community. And I think if we were in this consistency of 20%, I would actually be looking at a bigger cut. And the reason being is we're cutting human service agencies and positions. And it's really hard for me to fund a rodeo, which does bring in economic development to the community, when we're cutting senior centers and they're losing employees and libraries. I have to be honest, if we weren't on the consistency, I may actually be pushing more for a complete reduction, because I just think within the budget place we're at right now, I don't know if that's the right way to spend the money, but I would go with that at this point.
Okay, any other comments, commissioners? Okay, thank you very much.
You bet. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Museum, Mr. David, I believe you're here. Welcome. Good afternoon.
Evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Introduce
I'm
yourself.
David
again.
Mead,
Thank you.
Director of the Sweetwater County Museum. I want to thank you for taking the time to talk with me about the museum's budget. I handed that out so you can read it. Maybe I won't have to read it all to you. First, I do want to apologize for any annoyance that we may have caused you by requesting an increase from last year's funding. My board did not mean to irritate you. And they had the museum's best interests at heart, and they are a volunteer board. But we do want to be a team player. Maybe a little bit of what Bonnie was saying earlier this afternoon applies, a lack of understanding. So, and I also want to thank you very much for all the county has done for the museum during the past year with our new storage facility, the mobile shelving unit, connectivity project, and other things, so many things that you've done for us. So I don't want to seem ungrateful at all. We did have a lot of changes and challenges, as others did over the past year due to the pandemic, and then also personnel changes with our director leaving and we did know the budget forecast. And so we didn't fill, I was moved into the directorship and we didn't fill my position, my former position exhibits. We did end up, after 7 months of trying to operate that way, we did end up making one of our part-time positions full-time, but it's a very much reduced salary. And the other part-timers, just a few hours a week, sometimes not even, sometimes nothing during a month at a time. Excuse me. So to get to the numbers, based on our current budget, our total expenditures for FY22 would be $350,000, which is about what we were awarded for 2021. Most of our costs are personnel costs, salaries and benefits, which come to about $305,000 next year. Our, I must say at this point, our staff, our people are our resource. And we do everything in-house. We have a full wood shop, fabrication, graphic design. We do our own collections, management and curation, and also reach out across the county with education and exhibits. And I won't bore you with this. I think most of you are pretty aware of what we do. So that said, 20% cut would be 280,726, which would be tough for us. Somebody would have to go. That said, we do have considerable savings due to salary savings and also due to just frugality. I am Scottish. So we have about $340,000. And assuming that we could carry that over, we could obviously take a cut and maybe the next year, but it's only going to be, it won't be sustainable for the long term. And we are one of the ones that Bonnie was mentioning earlier today that have to have the cash carryover for 150 days of the first 5 months. And then we also have fund for the tipple, Reliance tipple, which we manage, and in our bookstore inventory. So yes, Mr. Chairman, we don't want to be a bank for the county's money. But we do want to keep the museum open. And I think we do an awful lot across the county. And, as we try to diversify our economy, tourism is going to be a big thing. There's a lot of potential, I believe, for the museum to participate. We do a lot of educational things. But, so I won't read all the rest of this to you. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me and to consider our situation.
Thank you, Mr. Mead. Questions for Dave, commissioners? Okay, go ahead.
What did you say your days cash on hand was? Because what I'm showing in what Bonnie provided us is 334 days.
So that is the figure that we came up with when we put this together.
Okay.
But then, and
go ahead.
Bonnie can jump in at any time.
No, you go ahead. I was just going to bring it up.
Okay, so Bonnie and I sat down and worked this out. And so I think it's fairly accurate, but of course you have to subtract 150 days from the 334. But we're saying good. I have to admit, and I think, we can withstand cuts, but they're not going to be sustainable forever because we don't have another source of income. That said, if you look at the speech I was going to give you, I think the museum has great potential for grants and to find other funding. We actually have a funding branch, our foundation, which can accept money. And that I think we could do a lot with fundraising. And it's something I want to explore. And another thing that I know Mr. Chairman has been thinking about, and I've spent a lot of time talking with the other commissioners, Commissioner Scheinfeld, about ways that we can combine resources, such as our bookkeeping and other payroll and that type of thing. We're soon to be connected to the county. Unfortunately, our security camera system quit working. Bad timing. Yeah, we're looking at $2,500 to repair what we have, which is a 15-year-old, whenever the museum was first, at least 15-year-old system. Or with our new connectivity, they are actually dropping camera cables. But to make use of that and the new technology would cost at least $10,000. I hate numbers.
Well, I love technology, but it's your worst enemy, David.
It can be, can't
Can
it?
be, can it?
Definitely, when it doesn't work.
That's right. Or as you upgrade, becomes. worse.
Right. Oh, yes. It's like you throw all that stuff away, put it in the collection.
Got it. All right. Anything else, David?
I think that's it.
Questions? Other questions, Commissioner Shanefield? Other commissioners, any questions? You know, I just was, no, nobody down there. Okay. I'd just like to comment that in some ways you're in a good spot because by statute, there needs to be a museum located in the county seat. And of course, the hardest part is defining what is that program, museum program. But we do know we are obligated to the museum, but we appreciate your frugalness. We hope it will continue and you'll continue to work with us through that. I appreciate your comment about you don't want to be our bank. I love it. I mean,
It was your comment.
I know it, but at least you're listening. I don't know if you were able to listen first off when we were
I did.
starting. So yeah, I think anytime it can benefit you to go after grants and that type of thing, you know, it gives us an opportunity to free up some money to help organizations like you sat and watched tonight, this afternoon, in which we did what we did.
That's very tough.
It is.
I
but
don't know how you can do it.
the more funding that you get from other areas in the future will allow us to hopefully redirect some money towards those as well, those other entities as well. So I'm really glad to hear that you're thinking of moving in that effort to work in that direction, because that's what we need to get through this together.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Questions, commissioners, comments? All right, thank you, David. Appreciate it. And carry on and keep up the good work and keep fighting the good fight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, commissioners, we're at the point of our meeting where we have Sweetwater Medics and we have Castle Rock Hospital. And I requested executive sessions for those two separately. We have just to visit. I know we have some decisions to make working with Castle Rock because of their presentation as to nailing down exactly financially where we're going to be at with Castle Rock, but also with Sweetwater Medics and that we have the obligation to when working with them that we need to get a contract in front of them prior to July 1. So with that, I would ask, this is where I said earlier, we can make a motion, and I would ask that I'd entertain a motion to go into executive session for contract reasons. Go ahead.
Can I make a comment before that?
Sure.
I need to apologize to Commissioner Toman. I did not mean to single her out. I should have singled out Roy instead. It wasn't directed at you, and I apologize for that. So
thank you.
I
Singled
didn't
out
mean to.
Roy.
Okay.
Don't worry. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Toman. Thank you,
I don't
Commissioner
accept
Smith.
that apology, though.
There was no apology to you.
I just, yeah, it's keeping cooler heads, keeping focused on where it's at. It's a business move, whether we like it or not. That's what it is. But hang in there. It's not going to be forever. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Got a motion by Commissioner Smith.
I will second.
Second by Commissioner Toman. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 There, Motion carries. I do believe that when we come out, we'll be able to notify if those contracts were taken and being considered. Thank you.
Am I supposed to stay in executive or? am I supposed to-
No, you won't need to. Thank you.
All right, so I'm having everybody leave the Zoom.
I think, yeah, everybody, yeah, you need to take we'll come back on after this, but these are our last two items. Okay, so who's on?
Ron Gaddy's on here.
Okay,
I'm gonna take everybody else off. Christina doesn't need to be here, does she?
You've been a bench warmer out there before, so I think you get to do that again at the.
Okay.
yeah, let's do Sweetwater Medics first, okay? Go ahead.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna have to put people in the waiting room then, so I don't know who belongs to which organization. Who we doing
Okay.
first?
We're doing Sweetwater Medics. Ron Gaddy's on. Ron, is there
Yes, sir.
anybody else besides you that's going to be on?
No, I see Chief Kitchener is on, and I think that he was invited.
Okay, so we'll have Chief Kitchener, fire at, I thought I saw Fire Chief.
Dave Beat is on, but it was just. here.
Who? Now, hang on a second.
Here, I'll put it on a list.
Okay, there's the list.
Okay, so Belinda doesn't need to be here.
No. Is Jim Wamsley on, Ron?
I don't see him, sir.
Okay, so Todd needs to go into the waiting room, correct?
He's here in person.
He's in person.
Okay, well, he's also online. And who's Dave Mead?
Dave Mead's a museum guy, so you can take him off.
And it was just here.
I know,
No, they
I just left it on his
themselves
computer.
off.
You're probably right.
it's all right.
That's okay, I just.
We'll get through it.
Okay, so there's just Ron Gaddy and the fire.
Okay, is fire Scott Kitchener?
I believe so, sir.
Pardon?
I believe so, sir.
Fire at sweetwi.us. That's a
No, Doc.
county.
Doc, that's me. That's Bernaysian.
Oh,
Chief Kitchener is not on.
Okay, so we need fire to come off.
Yep.
Okay, so now it's just me and Ron.
All right. I believe Ron. Oh, it's just the commission, the clerk, our attorney, and yourself, unless you think somebody else is on as a board member from our ambulance board.
no, sir. I think it's just us.
Okay, the reason is I think you submitted your budget dollars and the commission, I believe, had any questions regarding that? Commissioners? Same as last year. Is that correct, Ron?
That is correct.
All right,
And
so go ahead.
we did have
Hold
Commissioner
on,
Smith.
Ron. Ron, hold.